You'll never amount to anything. The words still echoed in my mind as I stared at the screen, hardly believing what I was seeing. 4728 Maple Avenue, my childhood home, now marked in foreclosure in bold red letters. I hadn't set foot in Westridge for 10 years, not since the night my father threw my belongings onto the front lawn while my mother watched from the doorway, arms crossed. Now their house was being auctioned off to the highest bidder, and I, Aisha Thompson, had the means to become exactly that. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My phone buzzed, interrupting my trance. Darius, my business partner, was calling. Did you see it? He asked without preamble when I answered. I'm looking at it right now, I replied, unable to tear my eyes from the listing. The property details claimed it needed some TLC, a realtor's gentle euphemism for the disrepair evident even in the carefully angled photos. It's a hell of a coincidence, Darius said. We've been looking for property in that area for months, and suddenly your parents' house pops up. I don't believe in coincidences, I said, scrolling through more photos. The kitchen where my mother had once slapped my college application forms out of my hands, the staircase where my father had stood, telling me I was no longer welcome when I announced my plans to pursue computer science instead of working in his failing hardware store. This feels more like, I don't know, cosmic justice? Or a business opportunity, Darius said pragmatically. The location is perfect for what we want to do. He wasn't wrong. Our tech incubator company, Nexus Innovations, had been searching for a large residential property to convert into a live workspace for young entrepreneurs, somewhere they could develop their startups without worrying about rent, exactly the kind of support I'd needed at 18 and never received. I'm going to bid on it, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke the words. As Nexus or personally? Darius asked, though I suspected he already knew the answer. Personally, I replied. This one's different. After hanging up, I sat back in my ergonomic chair, gazing around my corner office on the 32nd floor of downtown Seattle's most prestigious high-rise. The skyline view through floor-to-ceiling windows had once seemed like an impossible dream to a girl whose parents believed women belonged behind cash registers, not desks. Now it was just another Monday. My assistant, Zoe, knocked gently on my open door. "Your 3 o'clock is here," she said. Then, noting my expression, "Everything okay?" I minimized the real estate listing on my screen. "Actually, I need to cancel the rest of my meetings today. Something's come up." Zoe, ever efficient, nodded without question. "I'll reschedule. Anything else you need?" "Book me a flight to Chicago for tomorrow and a hotel in Westridge. I'll be gone at least 3 days." After she left, I reopened the listing and dialed a number I rarely used. My cousin Tariq answered on the 4th ring. "Aisha?" He sounded surprised. "We spoke maybe once a year, usually on birthdays." "Is everything all right?" "Have you heard about Uncle Nathan and Aunt Patricia's house?" I asked, skipping pleasantries. A pause. "Yeah, it's not good. The bank's selling it. They moved into a rental apartment last month." "Why didn't you tell me?" I tried to keep the accusation out of my voice. Tariq had always straddled the divide between me and my parents, maintaining relationships with both sides after the fracture. "Honestly, they made everyone promise not to. Your mom especially doesn't want you to know. She says it would be humiliating if you found out how bad things have gotten." I let out a sharp laugh. "Too late. I'm looking at the listing right now." "Damn," Tariq muttered. "Look, things have been rough for them since the big hardware chains moved in. Uncle Nathan's store finally closed for good last year. They've been living on credit cards, trying to keep up appearances." The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had thrown me out for wanting to study useless computer nonsense instead of helping save the family store. Now the store was gone anyway, and that nonsense had built me a multi-million-dollar company. "I'm coming to town tomorrow," I said. "Because of the house?" Tariq sounded wary. "I'm interested in the property," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Aisha." The caution in his voice was clear. "What are you planning?" "A business investment." It wasn't entirely a lie. "Do they still have the same phone number?" "Yes, but they won't answer if they see it's you calling." The bluntness stung, even after all this time. "That's fine. I prefer face-to-face conversations anyway." After ending the call, I opened my desk drawer and removed a small wooden box I kept tucked in the back. Inside was a worn house key on a faded blue keychain, the key to 47 and 28 Maple Avenue that I'd never returned. My small act of defiance on the night, everything changed. I closed my hand around it, feeling its teeth press into my palm. I remembered that night with perfect clarity. The summer rain soaking through my t-shirt as I gathered my scattered belongings from the lawn, neighbors peering from behind curtains, my mother's final words, "You've made your choice, now live with it." I had lived with it. I'd couch-surfed with friends until my scholarship housing opened, worked 3 part-time jobs through college, graduated top of my class, founded Nexus with Darius, built it from nothing into a company that now employed over 200 people and had helped launch dozens of successful startups. My phone buzzed with a text from Michaela, my girlfriend of 2 years. "Still on for dinner tonight?" Made reservations at Altura for 7. I'd almost forgotten our anniversary dinner. I texted back quickly, "Definitely, and pack a bag after. We're going to Chicago tomorrow." Michaela, a corporate attorney who understood the demands of business, responded, "Immediately? Intriguing? Business or pleasure?" I stared at the question, fingers hovering over the keyboard. What exactly was this trip? Revenge? Closure? Business? Perhaps all three. "Unfinished business," I finally replied. I returned to the listing, clicking through to the virtual tour. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the once pristine lawn now patchy and overgrown. My old bedroom window, visible in one exterior shot, had a crack running diagonally across the glass. It was oddly fitting. Nothing about this home had remained intact, not the family inside it, not even its physical structure. The bank had set the starting bid low. Given the property's condition and the neighborhood's declining values, they clearly wanted a quick sale. I could easily offer double their asking price and still consider it a bargain for what I had planned. I picked up my phone again and called my personal financial advisor. "Harper, I need to liquidate some assets. I'm making a cash offer on a property." "The Seattle Lake House?" she asked, referring to a property we'd been considering for months. "No, something unexpected. A foreclosure in Illinois. I'll need about $400,000 available by tomorrow." "Not a problem. Just send me the details." Harper had stopped questioning my occasional impulsive investments years ago. They usually paid off. After handling the financial arrangements, I called Darius back. "I'm flying out tomorrow," I told him. "Want company?" he offered. Darius knew my history. He'd been my college roommate's boyfriend when I was still sleeping on their couch freshman year. "Not this time, but Michaela's coming." "Good. You shouldn't face this alone." He paused. "Have you thought about what you'll say when you see them?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the house itself, on the symbolism of purchasing it, that I hadn't fully processed the inevitability of coming face-to-face with my parents after a decade of silence. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to tell them exactly how wrong they were about me. Another part just wants to sign the papers and walk away without giving them the satisfaction of seeing me at all. "Whatever you decide, remember you're not that scared 18-year-old anymore," Darius said. "You're Aisha Thompson, CEO of Nexus Innovations, listed in Forbes's 40 Under 40. You've got nothing to prove to them. I know, I said, but the tight feeling in my chest suggested otherwise. After hanging up, I closed my laptop and gathered my things. The office could survive without me for a few days. I had bigger concerns, like what exactly I would say to the people who had discarded me a decade ago and were now about to watch me purchase the home they'd lost. As I rode the elevator down to the parking garage, I realized my hands were shaking. This wasn't just about a property acquisition or even a symbolic gesture. This was about confronting the pain that had driven me for 10 years, the desperate need to prove my parents wrong that had fueled every late night, every risk, every success. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. In my Tesla, I sat motionless for several minutes before starting the engine. On the dashboard screen, I pulled up a photo I rarely looked at, my high school graduation. My parents flanking me, their smiles tight and performative. It was the last time we'd been photographed together, 2 months before everything fell apart. I touched my father's face on the screen. You said I'd never amount to anything, I whispered to the image. But you were wrong about that, just like you were wrong about everything else. I started the car and headed home to pack. Tomorrow, I would return to the place where they had broken me, the place I'd rebuilt myself in opposition to, the place that, whether they knew it or not, had set me on the path to becoming exactly who I needed to be, not for them, but in spite of them. Are you sure you're ready for this? Michaela asked as our plane began its descent into O'Hare. She squeezed my hand, her lawyer's eyes studying my face with the careful attention she usually reserved for complex contracts. I've been preparing for this moment for 10 years, I replied, gazing out at the sprawling Chicago suburbs coming into view below. I just didn't know it would happen like this. Michaela's thumb traced circles on my wrist. Tell me again about that last day. She'd heard the story before, but she understood my need to process it again now, on the threshold of return. I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. It was July 2013. Summer heat shimmered on the pavement as I carried the mail inside, sorting through bills and flyers. Among them was a thick envelope from the University of Illinois with my name on it. I'd applied in secret, using my after-school job money to pay the application fees. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Full scholarship, it read. My ticket out. My future. My mother found me at the kitchen table, acceptance letter in hand, tears of joy streaking my face. What's this? She'd asked, snatching the paper. Her expression changed as she read, morphing from curiosity to disgust. Computer science? We already discussed this, Aisha. You're working at the store after graduation. Mom, this is a full scholarship. Do you know how rare? Your father needs you at the store. The business is struggling. Family comes first. The hardware store, Thompson's Home Supply, had been in steady decline for years. Big box retailers had moved in, and my father, stubborn and inflexible, refused to modernize or adapt. 18-hour days and mounting debt had turned him bitter. His disappointment, seeping into every corner of our home. I can help more with a degree, I'd argued. I could build a website, create an inventory system. Your father doesn't need computer nonsense. He needs hands to stock shelves and run the register. When my father came home and learned about the scholarship, the argument escalated. Words like selfish, ungrateful, and disloyal flew across the dinner table. I'd fought back, for once refusing to shrink beneath their expectations. This is my life, I'd said. My one chance. Not while you live under my roof, my father had responded, his voice dangerously quiet. Then I won't live under your roof anymore. The words had slipped out before I could stop them, hanging in the air between us like a challenge. My father's expression had hardened, a look I'd never seen before. If that's your choice, then go. But don't expect us to support you. Don't expect to come crawling back when you fail. Nathan, my mother had interjected, momentarily startled by his vehemence. No, Patricia. She thinks she's better than us, better than the business that put food in her mouth. Let her find out how hard the world is without family. I'd stood, my ground, even as fear rippled through me. I'll take that chance. What followed still haunted my dreams. My father, storming upstairs to my bedroom, emptying drawers and closets. My clothes, books, and the laptop I'd saved for over a year to buy, all tossed unceremoniously onto the front lawn. My mother, not intervening, just watching with arms crossed. Neighbors had peered from windows and porches as I gathered my scattered belongings in the gathering dusk, shoving whatever I could into my school backpack and a single duffel bag. The rest, my childhood books, photo albums, keepsakes, I'd been forced to abandon. You've made your choice, my mother had said from the doorway, blocking my attempted re-entry. Now, live with it. I will, I'd promised, voice breaking despite my determination not to cry. And someday you'll see how wrong you were. You'll never amount to anything without us, my father had called after me as I walked away. You'll come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. But I hadn't. Not when I slept on park benches until my friend Maya's family let me stay with them until college housing opened. Not when I worked 3 part-time jobs while carrying a full course load. Not when I'd been hospitalized for exhaustion during finals week of sophomore year, with no family to visit me. Aisha. Michaela's voice pulled me back to the present as the plane touched down with a jolt. We've landed. I blinked, focusing on her concerned face. Sorry, got lost in memories. Understandable. She brushed a tear from my cheek I hadn't realized was there. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is brave. Brave or vindictive? I asked with a wry smile. Maybe a little of both, she admitted, but you've earned the right to your feelings, whatever they are. We deplaned and collected our luggage, heading to the rental car counter. I'd reserved a sleek black Audi, not my usual practical choice, but today was about making a statement. As we drove the familiar highway toward Westridge, I filled Michaela in on the details Tariq had shared during a brief phone call that morning. My parents moved into a 1-bedroom apartment near my dad's sister. They've been telling everyone it's temporary, just until they downsize to something more manageable. Classic saving face. And they have no idea you know about the foreclosure? None. Tariq says they're mortified at the thought of me finding out. Apparently my father still tells anyone who'll listen that I'm probably struggling somewhere, unable to admit I was wrong. Michaela shook her head in disbelief. Even after seeing your name in business magazines, you're hardly keeping a low profile. I think they've convinced themselves it's a different Aisha Thompson, I said. Or that the media is exaggerating my success. It's easier than admitting they were wrong. We passed the Welcome to Westridge sign, its peeling paint and faded colors a testament to the town's economic decline. The main street looked emptier than I remembered, several storefronts vacant with for lease signs gathering dust in windows. There, I pointed as we drove past a corner building with plywood covering its display windows. That was Thompson's. Home Supply. Michaela slowed the car. The faded outline of our family name was still visible on the brick facade. It looks like it's been closed a while, she observed. Tariq said about a year. Apparently, my dad held on way longer than made financial sense. I felt an unexpected twist of sadness. Whatever my feelings about my parents, the store had been part of my childhood. I'd stocked shelves there after school, memorized inventory codes, counted change for customers. We continued through town toward our hotel, passing my old high school and the park where I'd spent those first homeless nights. Everything looked smaller, shabbier than in my memories. At the Westridge Inn, a budget hotel that constituted the town's only accommodations for visitors, we checked into our room and I immediately opened my laptop to check my emails. The bank handling the foreclosure had confirmed receipt of my offer, significantly above asking price, with no contingencies and a 15-day closing guarantee. "They've accepted," I announced, scanning the email that had just arrived. "The property? Viewing is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. "That's fast," Michaela remarked, unpacking her suitcase with characteristic efficiency. I made sure it would be. I closed my laptop. I don't want to give my parents time to find out and interfere. Somehow. Do you think they would? I don't know what they'd do. That's the problem. These aren't the people I grew up with, not anymore. The parents I knew were strict and traditional, but not cruel. Something changed that summer. I walked to the window, looking out at the town I'd once called home. From this vantage point, I could just make out the water tower with Westridge Wildcats painted on its side, a landmark visible from almost anywhere in town. "What changed?" Michaela asked, coming to stand beside me. "Money problems, mainly. The store was failing. Bills piled up. They started fighting at night when they thought I couldn't hear. My father drank more, worked longer hours for diminishing returns. My mother grew bitter, blaming everyone but themselves. They needed a scapegoat, and when I chose education over family obligation, I became one." My phone buzzed with a text from Tariq. "Heard you're in town. Coffee tomorrow?" I replied quickly. "Busy morning. Late lunch at Riverside Cafe? 2 p.m.? His response came immediately. "See you there. Be careful, Aisha. Town's small." He didn't need to elaborate. In Westridge, with its population of just under 9,000, news traveled fast. My presence wouldn't stay secret for long. "We should get some rest," I told Michaela. "Tomorrow's going to be intense." As I prepared for bed, another text came through. This one from Darius. "Bank contact says property is vacant and ready for viewing. Previous owners fully moved out. Good luck tomorrow." Previous owners. Such a clinical term for the people who had given me life, then taken away everything else. I lay awake long after Michaela fell asleep, staring at the popcorn ceiling of our hotel room. Tomorrow, I would stand in the house where I'd grown up, where I'd once felt safe, where I'd ultimately been rejected. I would walk those rooms as a potential buyer, not a daughter. The symmetry was almost too perfect. My parents had cast me out when I was at my most vulnerable, and now I had the power to purchase their home when they were at theirs. The question that kept me awake wasn't whether I would go through with it, but what doing so would cost me emotionally. And whether, after all this time, that price might still be too high. The morning of the property viewing dawned bright and cool, sunlight streaming through the thin hotel curtains. I'd been awake for hours, reviewing the offer documents and preparing for what lay ahead. Beside me, Michaela stirred. "Have you slept at all?" she asked, eyeing the coffee cups littering the small desk where I sat. "Enough," I lied, running a hand through my hair. "The bank representative called. She's meeting us at the house at 10. Michaela checked her watch. "That gives us time for a real breakfast at least." We found a diner on Main Street, a greasy spoon that had been there since I was a child. I hesitated before entering, scanning the parking lot for familiar vehicles. "We don't have to eat here," Michaela said, noting my apprehension. "No, it's fine. The food's good." I pushed open the door, the bell jangling overhead. Inside, not much had changed. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, a scratched counter stretched along one wall, and the air smelled of bacon and coffee. A few early patrons glanced up as we entered, their gazes lingering a beat too long on unfamiliar faces. We slid into a booth near the back, and I kept my head down, studying the laminated menu I already knew by heart. The waitress, a woman in her 50s I didn't recognize, brought water and took our orders without any sign she knew who I was. Just as I was beginning to relax, a voice called from across the diner. Aisha? Aisha Thompson, is that you? My stomach dropped. I looked up to see Mrs. Hendricks, my former high school English teacher, approaching our table with a wide smile. She'd aged, her formerly dark hair now streaked with gray, but her keen eyes were the same. Mrs. Hendricks, I said, standing to accept her enthusiastic hug. It's been years. What a wonderful surprise. She held me at arm's length, examining me. You look fantastic. I heard you were doing well out west. I introduced her to Michaela, buying time while I considered how much to reveal. Are you in town visiting your parents? Mrs. Hendricks asked, her expression growing concerned. I heard about the store closing. Such a shame after all those years. Actually, I'm here on business, I replied carefully. Just a quick trip. Well, I'm sure they'll be thrilled to see you regardless. I run into your mother at the grocery store occasionally. She doesn't say much, but mothers always miss their children. I nodded non-committally, unsure how to respond. Did my mother miss me? Had she ever mentioned me to others in town? Or had I been erased from family narratives, a disappointing chapter best forgotten? I should let you enjoy your breakfast, Mrs. Hendricks said, sensing my discomfort. But it's wonderful to see you, Aisha. I always knew you'd do great things. After she left, I pushed my eggs around my plate, appetite gone. That's going to complicate things, I muttered. How so? Michaela asked. Mrs. Hendricks is good friends with half the town. By noon, everyone will know I'm back, including my parents. I checked my watch. We need to hurry. I want to be at the house before any complications arise. We paid and left, driving through residential streets toward Maple Avenue. The neighborhoods grew more familiar with each turn. The corner where I'd waited for the school bus, the park where I'd had my first kiss, the public library where I'd spent countless afternoons teaching myself coding when my parents thought I was studying traditional subjects. That's Maya's house, I pointed out as we passed a small blue bungalow. Her family let me stay with them after everything. Her mom packed me lunches for school even though they could barely afford it. Have you stayed in touch? Michaela asked. Christmas cards. She's a nurse in Milwaukee now, married with twins. We turned onto Maple Avenue and my words dried up. There it was, 4728, my childhood home. The two-story brick colonial with white shutters looked shabbier than in the listing photos. The lawn was overgrown. The flower beds I'd once helped my mother tend now choked with weeds. The basketball hoop my father had installed on my 12th birthday tilted precariously over the driveway, its backboard cracked. This is it? Michaela asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. A sleek sedan pulled up behind us, and a woman in a crisp suit emerged, briefcase in hand. The bank representative, right on time. Ms. Thompson? She called, approaching with an outstretched hand. I'm Vanessa Klein from First Capital Bank. Thank you for your punctuality. We exchanged pleasantries, and she unlocked the front door, stepping aside to let me enter first. I hesitated on the threshold, memories washing over me in dizzying waves. Take your time, Michaela murmured, her hand steady on my back. I stepped inside, hit immediately by the familiar smell, a mixture of my mother's lavender cleaning products and my father's pipe tobacco, though both were long gone. The entryway opened to a living room that seemed smaller than I remembered, the walls bare of the family photos that had once hung there. As you can see, Vanessa said, consulting her. Notes, the property has been vacated but requires significant updating. The previous owners, I know who they are, I interrupted. This was my family home. Vanessa's professional demeanor faltered momentarily. I see. I wasn't aware of the connection. Will that be a problem for the purchase? No, I said firmly. It's precisely why I'm interested. We continued the tour, each room unleashing new memories. The dining room, where we'd had Sunday dinners. The kitchen, where I'd learned to bake with my grandmother before she passed. My parents' bedroom, now empty of furniture but still bearing the floral wallpaper my mother had cherished. And finally, my old room at the end of the hall. I pushed the door open slowly, bracing myself. It was completely transformed. The walls, once painted the pale blue I'd chosen at 13, were now a stark white. The built-in bookshelf where I'd displayed my academic trophies had been removed, leaving rectangular patches of uneven paint. The space had been converted to a home office, though the desk and filing cabinets were gone, leaving only mounting brackets on the walls. "They erased me," I whispered, running my hand along the windowsill where I'd once kept a row of small plants. "What do you mean?" Michaela asked. After I left, they converted my room immediately, removed any trace I'd ever lived here. Vanessa cleared her throat awkwardly. "If you'd like some privacy to inspect the property, I can wait downstairs." I nodded gratefully, and she retreated, leaving Michaela and me alone in the empty room. "Are you okay?" Michaela asked once we were alone. I expected to feel, I don't know, satisfaction, vindication, standing in their empty house, knowing I'm about to buy it. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall where my bed had once been. Instead, I just feel sad. For them. For me. For all the years wasted on pride and stubbornness. Michaela sat beside me, taking my hand. "It's not too late, you know, to reach out, to try for reconciliation." I shook my head. "You don't understand. They didn't just kick me out. They erased me, removed every trace that I existed. Who does that to their child?" Before she could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Tariq. "Emergency. Parents know you're in town. Saw Mrs. Hendricks at grocery store. They're looking for you." A second text quickly followed. "They know about the house too. Someone at the bank told them. They're furious." Damn it. I showed Michaela the messages. This is exactly what I was afraid of. "What do you want to do?" I stood, brushing dust from my pants. "Finish the viewing, sign the papers. I didn't come all this way to back down now." We rejoined Vanessa downstairs, where I tried to focus on the practical details, inspection reports, closing costs, property taxes. But my mind kept returning to Tariq's warning. My parents were looking for me. After 10 years of silence, they wanted to find me. Not for reconciliation, but because they were furious. Some things never changed. As we concluded the tour, on the back patio, my phone rang. Unknown number, but with the local area code. I declined the call. "Everything looks in order," I told Vanessa. "I'd like to proceed with the offer as discussed." She nodded, opening her briefcase to retrieve documents. "We can complete the preliminary paperwork now. Given your cash offer and the expedited timeline you've requested, we should be able to close within 2 weeks." My phone rang again. Same number. I declined it again. "Is there somewhere we can sit to review the papers?" I asked. Vanessa gestured. "To the kitchen. The previous owners left the breakfast table. We can use that." We were midway through signing the initial documents when a car screeched to a halt in the driveway, doors slamming moments later. Michaela glanced out the window, her expression tightening. "Aisha," she said quietly, "I think your parents are here." Heavy footsteps pounded up the front walk, followed by the sound of keys in the lock. The front door burst open. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" My father's voice, older but still instantly recognizable, thundered through the house. "This is our home." Vanessa stood alarmed. "Sir, you can't be here. This property is in foreclosure and under bank control. How did you get in?" "With my key," he snapped, storming into the kitchen with my mother close behind. "Because this is my house." 10 years fell away in an instant. There they were, My parents, older and grayer but unmistakable. My father, once imposing, now appeared diminished, his shoulders hunched, his face lined with bitterness. My mother, thinner than I remembered, her eyes wide with shock as they landed on me. "Aisha," she whispered, as if seeing a ghost. For a moment, no one spoke. The air crackled with a decade of unspoken words, of hardened hurts and festering wounds. Then my father found his voice again. "You," he said, my name apparently still difficult for him to speak. "You're the buyer?" I stood, straightening to my full height, meeting his gaze steadily. "Yes." "Why?" he demanded. "To humiliate us? Is that it?" The question hung between us, demanding an answer I wasn't sure I could articulate even to myself. Was it revenge? Justice? Closure? Or something else entirely? A reclaiming of what had been taken from me? Whatever my answer, it would change. Everything. Again. "I think we should continue this discussion privately," Vanessa suggested, gathering her papers. "The bank doesn't typically allow previous owners on the premises during viewings." "Previous owners?" My father's face flushed with anger. "This is still my house until someone else's name is on the deed." "Actually, Mr. Thompson," Vanessa replied, her professional tone unwavering, "the bank assumed ownership when you defaulted on your mortgage. Legally, you're trespassing." My mother placed a restraining hand on my father's arm. "Nathan, please, let's not make a scene." His eyes never left my face. Too late for that? Our daughters come home to gloat over our misfortune. The scene's already been made. "I'm not here to gloat," I said, finding my voice at last. "I'm here as a buyer, nothing more." "A buyer," he repeated incredulously. "And of all the houses in all the world, you just happen to choose ours? You expect us to believe that?" Michaela stepped forward, extending her hand. "I'm Michaela Washington, Aisha's partner. Perhaps we could all sit down somewhere and discuss this calmly." My mother looked from Michaela to me, a flicker of something. Surprise? Disapproval? Crossing her face before she composed herself. "There's a coffee shop on Main Street," she suggested. "Riverside Cafe," I said automatically. "I know it." It had been my sanctuary during high school, a place to study away from my father's constant demands for help at the store. "I need to return to the bank," Vanessa interjected. "Ms. Thompson, shall we reschedule the rest of our paperwork?" "No need," I replied, keeping my gaze steady on my father. "I've seen everything I need to see. I'll sign the documents this afternoon." As planned. My father made a dismissive sound. "Still as stubborn as ever." "I learned from the best," I countered. Vanessa excused herself awkwardly, promising to meet me at the bank at 3 o'clock. Once she left, the four of us stood in uncomfortable silence in the kitchen where we'd once shared family meals. "We should go," my mother finally said. "We're parked behind you anyway." The drive to the cafe was tense, with my parents following, close behind our rental car. Michaela kept glancing in the rearview mirror, concern etched on her face. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "We could still back out, head to the airport." "And what? Run away again?" I shook my head. I didn't come this far to leave without answers. "What answers are you looking for exactly?" I considered the question as we pulled into the cafe parking lot. "I want to know if they ever regretted what they did, if they ever looked for me, if they even know what happened to me after they threw me out." Inside Riverside Cafe, little had changed. The same mismatched furniture, local artwork on the walls, and scent of fresh-baked pastries. We claimed a table in the corner, away from the handful of other patrons. My parents entered moments later, my father scanning the room before spotting us. They approached slowly, almost reluctantly, and took the seats across from us. A waitress appeared, cheerfully oblivious to the tension at our table. "Welcome to Riverside. Can I get you started with some drinks?" We ordered coffees, and awkward silence fell until the beverages arrived. My mother wrapped her hands around her mug as if seeking warmth, though the day was mild. "You look well," she finally said, studying me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Healthy." "I am," I replied simply. "And successful, apparently," my father added with an edge to his voice. "Successful enough to buy a house with cash." "Several houses, actually," I corrected before I could stop myself. "This would be my fourth property." His eyebrows rose slightly. "And what is it exactly that you do?" The question sent a spike of anger through me. 10 years of silence, and he couldn't even be bothered to find out what had become of me? "I co-founded and run a technology company called Nexus Innovations. We create collaborative workspaces and incubation programs for tech startups." "I've heard of Nexus," my mother said quietly. "There was an article in the Chicago Tribune business section last year." I nodded. "We were expanding our Midwest operations." "And now you're here to buy our house," my father said, cutting through the small talk. "Why?" "The location works for our newest project," I said, maintaining the business pretense, though. We all knew there was more to it. "There are dozens of properties for sale in this county," he countered. "Why this one?" "Nathan," my mother murmured warningly. "No, Patricia. I want to hear her say it. I want to hear her admit she's doing this out of spite." Michaela tensed beside me, but I placed a calming hand on her knee beneath the table. "It's not spite," I said evenly. "It's business. The property meets our needs and was available at a good price." "Bullshit," my father spat, causing heads to turn at nearby tables. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing us brought low while you swoop in with your money and your fancy girlfriend?" "That's enough," Michaela said firmly. "Aisha has been nothing but professional about this transaction." My mother touched my father's arm again, her fingers leaving wrinkles in his shirt sleeve. "Please, Nathan. Not here." He subsided, jaw clenched, eyes burning with resentment. My mother turned to me, her expression softening slightly. "We heard you were doing well," she said. "Your cousin Tariq mentioned you were in Seattle. We didn't know about your company." "You could have called," I pointed out, "or emailed, or sent a letter. My contact information hasn't changed since college." "We didn't think you'd want to hear from us," she said, eyes downcast, "after how things ended." "How things ended," I repeated incredulously. "You mean after you watched Dad throw my belongings on the lawn and told me I'd made my choice? After 10 years of complete silence?" "You never reached out either," my father countered. "I was 18. You were my parents. It was your job to protect me, not discard me because I wanted an education instead of working in a failing business." The cafe had grown quiet, other customers pretending not to listen while obviously straining to catch every word. Michaela placed a gentle hand on my back, reminding me to breathe. "Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private," she suggested. My mother nodded gratefully. "Our apartment isn't far." "No," I said firmly. "I have a meeting with the bank at 3. We finish this here." My father leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What exactly do you want from us, Aisha? An apology? Forgiveness? What?" It was the question I'd been asking myself since seeing the listing. What did I want? Vindication? Justice? Some admission that they'd been wrong about me? "I want to understand," I said finally. "I want to know how parents could throw their child away over a college choice. I want to know if you ever regretted it, or tried to find me. I want to know if you have any idea what those first months were like for me." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Of course we regretted it. Almost immediately. But you were gone. And your father." She stopped, glancing at him. "My pride," he admitted reluctantly. I was too proud to admit I'd made a mistake. And then too much time had passed, and it seemed impossible to bridge the gap. So you redecorated my room instead, I said. Erased every trace of me. That was my fault, my mother said softly. I couldn't bear to see your things, knowing you weren't coming back. It was too painful. Painful for you? I slept on park benches. I ate from food pantries. I worked 3 jobs while taking full-time classes because I had no safety net, no family support. My father flinched visibly. We didn't know. You didn't try to know. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Here's what's going to happen. I'm purchasing the house. The sale will close in 2 weeks. What I do with it afterward is my business. And what exactly do you plan to do with it? My father asked, a hint of his old suspicion returning. That depends partly on what I learn today, I replied honestly. Learn about what? About whether there's anything worth salvaging here. I gestured between us. About whether you're the same people who threw me away, or if you've changed in the intervening years. My mother reached across the table, hesitantly touching my hand. I didn't pull away. We've changed, she whispered, losing the store, the house. It's been humbling, but losing you was worse. Much worse. Then why didn't you reach out? I asked, the question that had haunted me for a decade. Fear, my father admitted, surprising me with his candor. Fear that you'd reject us. Fear that you'd failed and wouldn't want us to know. Fear that you'd succeeded and wouldn't need us anymore. And then we started seeing your name, my mother added. First in a small technology blog Tariq showed us, then in larger publications. We realized you'd done exactly what you said you would, exactly what we said you couldn't. We were wrong, my father said, the words clearly difficult for him. About everything. About you. I studied him, searching for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but found only weariness and regret. Tell me what happened after you left, my mother requested softly. Please, we've imagined so many scenarios. So I told them. About Maya's family taking me in temporarily, about working multiple minimum wage jobs while maintaining my scholarship requirements, about the professor who became a mentor when he discovered I was living in the 24-hour computer lab during holidays when dorms closed, about meeting Darius in an entrepreneurship class, and our late-night coding sessions that led to our first app, and eventually to Nexus. They listened without interrupting, my mother occasionally wiping tears, my father growing increasingly somber. When I finished, a heavy silence hung between us. We failed you, my father finally said, his voice rough with emotion. Completely and utterly failed you as parents. It was the acknowledgement I'd been waiting for, perhaps even the reason I'd come back. But instead of satisfaction, I felt only a profound sadness for all the wasted years, the moments that could never be reclaimed. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. Is there any way, my mother asked hesitantly, any way at all that we might start to make amends? I glanced at my watch. I need to get to the bank, but there's something you should know about the house. They looked at me expectantly, perhaps bracing for the final blow. News that I planned to demolish it, or flip it for profit, or some other symbolic erasure of their existence. I'm not buying it for myself, I said, or even primarily for Nexus. Then why? My father asked. That's what I'm still figuring out, I replied, rising from the table. I'll be in town for 2 more days. Perhaps we can continue this conversation tomorrow. As Michaela and I walked toward the door, my mother called after me. Aisha, are you happy in your life now? I turned back to look at them, these 2 diminished figures who had once been the center of my world. Yes, I said truthfully. I built a good life. No thanks to you, but also, in some strange way, because of you. Outside in the fresh air, Michaela squeezed my hand. You did really well in there. Did I? I wasn't sure what I'd accomplished beyond stirring up old pain. You got some of the answers you were looking for, and you gave them a lot to think about. As we drove toward the bank, I found myself dwelling not on my parents' mistakes, but on something else entirely. The purpose of this house, once it became mine. I'd come seeking closure, perhaps even revenge. But standing in those empty rooms, facing my parents across that cafe table, I'd glimpsed something unexpected. The possibility of a different kind of resolution. The question now was whether I had the courage to pursue it. The bank meeting was mercifully straightforward. I signed the necessary papers, transferred the initial deposit, and scheduled the closing for 2 weeks from Friday. Vanessa remained, professionally neutral, though I caught her curious glances. Clearly, word of my confrontation with my parents had already reached her. "Congratulations, Ms. Thompson," she said as we concluded our business. "The property is officially under contract." I nodded, feeling strangely hollow despite achieving exactly what I'd come for. "Thank you for your efficiency." Outside the bank, Michaela checked her messages while I stared unseeing at the town square across the street, where a bronze statue of Westridge's founder stood amid carefully tended flower beds. "Darius wants an update," she reported, "and your cousin Tariq has texted 3 times asking if you're okay. I'll call Darius from the hotel. As for Tariq..." I hesitated. I still want to meet him, but I'm not up for more family drama. Today. "Too late," Michaela murmured, nodding toward a figure hurrying across the square toward us. "I think that's him now." Tariq approached, his familiar gait bringing an unexpected lump to my throat. We'd been close once, more like siblings than cousins, sharing secrets and dreams throughout childhood. "Aisha," he called, slightly out of breath as he reached us. "I've been looking everywhere for you." "Hey, Tariq." I introduced him to Michaela. Watching his face for signs of judgment or surprise, there were none. Just the same open acceptance that had characterized our relationship since childhood. "I heard about what happened at the house," he said without preamble. "Are you okay?" "News travels fast," I remarked dryly. "Mrs. Winters from next door called her daughter, who texted her cousin, who works with my wife." He shrugged. "You know how Westridge is." I did know. The town's informal information network had been both comfort and curse growing up. People always looking out for each other, but privacy virtually non-existent. "I'm fine," I assured him. We had coffee afterward. It was civil mostly. "Civil?" he repeated skeptically. "With Uncle Nathan, the man who once yelled at the mayor during a town meeting?" "He's different now," I admitted reluctantly. Subdued. "Losing everything will do that to you," Tariq said. "Look, can we talk? Somewhere? There are things you should know." We ended up at a small park near the river, sitting at a picnic table while children played nearby on aging equipment. Michaela excused herself to make some work calls, giving us privacy. "You look good, Aisha," Tariq said once we were settled. "Success suits you." "Thanks. You too." He'd grown into his lanky frame, now a confident-looking man with a wedding ring and the beginnings of smile lines around his eyes. "Your mom mentioned you're a high school principal now?" "Vice principal," he corrected. "At Westridge High. Ironically enough. The same halls where we used to pass notes and complain about teachers." "Life's full of circles," I observed, thinking of my impending ownership of my childhood home. "Speaking of which," Tariq leaned forward, his expression turning serious, "there's something you need to understand about your parents." I tensed, defensive instincts kicking in. "If you're about to ask me to forgive them?" "I'm not," he interrupted. "What they did was inexcusable. I told them so at the time, and many times since." This surprised me. "You did? Why do you think there was such a rift between our families for years? My mom barely spoke to yours after what happened to you." Dad refused to help Uncle Nathan with the store when things got bad. We all thought it was monstrous, what they did. I blinked back unexpected tears. I didn't know that. How could you? They isolated themselves, wallowing in their pride and stubbornness. He sighed. But something changed after the store closed. It was like watching a man's entire identity collapse. Your father had defined himself by that business for 30 years. When it failed, something in him broke. Are you asking me to feel sorry for him? The edge in my voice was unmistakable. No, I'm giving you context. After the bankruptcy, he sank into a depression so severe we worried about his safety. Your mother finally insisted he see someone, get medication. It helped, but it also forced him to confront a lot of things he'd been avoiding, including what he'd done to you. I processed this information, trying to reconcile it with the bitter man who'd raised me and the subdued figure I'd encountered. Earlier, he said they regretted it, that they were too afraid to reach out. That's partially true, Tariq acknowledged. But there's more. About 6 months ago, he drafted a letter to you. Spent weeks on it, according to your mother. He finally mailed it to your old college address, the only one he had. My heart skipped. I never received any letter. It came back marked no longer at this address. He took it as a sign that the door was permanently closed. Tariq reached into his jacket pocket. Your mother kept a copy. She gave it to me last Christmas, in case I ever had contact with you. He handed me an envelope, my name written in my father's distinctive slanted handwriting. I stared at it, afraid to open it in public where my reaction might be witnessed by strangers. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because you're buying their house, Aisha. That's a major statement, whether you admit it or not. I need to know if you're doing it to help them or hurt them, because they're in a fragile state. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I said defensively. Then what are you trying to do? Because from the outside, it looks like revenge. The directness of his question caught me off guard. What was I trying to do? The answer had seemed so clear when I first saw the listing. But now, I don't know anymore, I admitted. Initially, maybe it was about proving something, showing them I succeeded without them. But being back here, seeing them today, it's more complicated than I thought. Tariq's expression softened. Family usually is. They're not really my family anymore, I pointed out. They gave up that right a decade ago. Maybe. But they're still the people who raised you for 18 years. That connection doesn't just disappear, no matter what happened afterward. I turned the envelope over in my hands, tracing my name with a fingertip. Have you read this? He shook his head. It wasn't for me. But Aunt Patricia said it contains everything he couldn't bring himself to say in person. My phone buzzed. A text from Darius asking for confirmation that the contract had been signed. Business continued, regardless of personal drama. I should get back to the hotel, I said, rising from the bench. Michaela and I have dinner plans. With your parents? Tariq asked hopefully. No, business associates. This wasn't entirely true, we had no plans at all, but I needed space to process everything I'd learned. Will you read the letter? He persisted. I don't know, maybe. I tucked it into my bag, both wanting and dreading to know its contents. Tariq walked me back to where Michaela waited. Before we parted, he hugged me tightly, the familiar scent of his cologne triggering memories of happier times. Whatever you decide about the house, about your parents, I'm here, he said. I should have been there for you back then. I'm sorry I wasn't. You were 19 yourself, away at college, I reminded him. It wasn't your responsibility. Still, family should stick together. He stepped back, studying my face. You were always the strongest of us, Aisha. The smartest, too. But don't let old wounds dictate your future. You've already proven them wrong 1,000 times over. As Michaela and I walked back to our rental car, she asked, "What was that about? You seem shaken." I showed her the envelope. Apparently, my father wrote to me months ago. The letter was returned undelivered. "Are you going to read it?" I don't know if I want to give him the satisfaction of being heard after all this time. She unlocked the car, considering my words. Maybe it's not about giving him satisfaction. Maybe it's about giving yourself information to make a decision you won't regret. Back at the hotel, I sat on the bed while Michaela showered, staring at the envelope as if it might bite. Finally, taking a deep breath, I carefully opened it and unfolded the pages inside. Dear Aisha, I've started this letter 100 times over the years, always discarding my efforts as inadequate. How does a father apologize for destroying his relationship with his daughter? What words could possibly convey the depth of my regret, my shame, my endless self-recrimination? The simple truth is this: I was wrong. Wrong to prioritize a failing business over your dreams. Wrong to let my pride and fear dictate my actions. Wrong to punish you for your ambition and independence. Qualities I should have celebrated instead of feared. That summer night, the worst of my life, I acted out of panic and wounded pride. The store was failing. Bills were mounting. The future I'd planned was crumbling, and instead of adapting, I lashed out at the person who least deserved it: you. There is no excuse, but perhaps some context will help you understand, if not forgive. My father abandoned our family when I was 12. I swore I would never be like him, that I would build something lasting, something that would provide security for my family. The store became my identity, my proof that I was a better man than he had been. When you chose a different path, it felt like rejection. In my warped thinking, I convinced myself you were abandoning the family just as my father had abandoned his. It was irrational. It was unfair. It was unforgivable. I have followed your career from afar, through news articles and snippets from those brave enough to mention your name to me. Your success has been both my greatest joy and my deepest shame. Joy that you have achieved so much, shame that I tried to prevent it and have no right to take pride in it. The store is gone now. The house will follow soon. I have failed at the very thing I sacrificed our relationship to preserve. The irony is painful, but deserved. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that not a day has passed that I haven't regretted my actions. Not a success I've heard about that hasn't filled me with bittersweet pride. Not a holiday or birthday that hasn't been hollow without you. Your mother feels the same, though she expresses it differently. She keeps a scrapbook of every article mentioning you or your company. She has followed your journey silently, afraid that reaching out would only cause you more pain. If you've read this far, thank you for that small kindness. If you choose never to respond, I will understand. I surrendered the right to be in your life through my own actions. But know this: you were always enough. The failure was never yours. It was mine, entirely mine. With deepest regret and enduring love, Dad, I read the letter twice, then a third time, emotions churning too chaotically to process. The handwriting grew unsteady toward the end, as if he'd been struggling to maintain composure. When Michaela emerged from the bathroom, she found me still sitting motionless on the bed, the pages spread beside me. "That bad?" she asked softly. "That honest," I replied, my voice distant even to my own ears. "I don't know what to do with this, Michaela. It's the apology I've been waiting 10 years to hear. And now that you've heard it? I don't know. If it changes anything, the damage is done. We can't go back." She sat beside me, picking up the letter with a questioning look. I nodded permission, and she read it quickly, her lawyer's eyes scanning for nuance and sincerity. "He's not asking for anything," she observed when she finished. Not forgiveness, not money, not even a response. That suggests genuine remorse, not manipulation. Or good strategy, I countered. Dad was always a shrewd negotiator. Perhaps, but people change, especially after significant loss. She returned the letter to me. The question isn't whether this changes the past. It's whether it might influence your plans for the future, specifically for that house. I nodded slowly, an idea beginning to crystallize, one that had been forming since our confrontation at the cafe. Not the vindictive plan I'd initially fantasized about, nor a simple business transaction, but something that might address old wounds while creating something new and meaningful. I need to make some calls, I said, reaching for my phone. Starting with Darius. As I waited for him to answer, I glanced again at the letter, at the signature. Dad, not your father or Nathan. It was the name I'd called him for 18 years before he became a stranger, now offered again like a tentative bridge across a chasm of hurt and regret. Whether I would cross that bridge remained uncertain. But for the first time in a decade, I could at least see the possibility of a path forward, one that didn't require forgetting the past, but might allow for building something different on its foundation. Just like the house that now, at least on paper, would soon be mine. It's ambitious, Darius said after I finished outlining my idea. His voice sounded tinny through the phone's speaker, which sat on the hotel desk between Michaela and me. But I think it aligns perfectly with our mission. The financials work, I confirmed, scanning the spreadsheet I'd hastily created. We've been looking to expand our youth initiative anyway, and the Westridge location would be significantly more affordable than Chicago proper. What about zoning? Michaela asked, ever practical. Residential to commercial conversions can get complicated. I checked the county records, I replied. The neighborhood is zoned mixed use, and there's precedent for similar conversions within a half-mile. You've done your homework, Darius noted, a smile evident in his voice. But I have to ask, Aisha, is this really about business expansion, or is it about other considerations? I glanced at my father's letter, which lay on the nightstand. Both, I admitted. The location genuinely works for our needs. But yes, there's a personal component to this decision. As long as we're clear about that, he said. I support this completely, but let's make sure we're making sound business decisions, not just emotional ones. That's why I have you both, I said, grateful for their level-headed perspectives. So we're agreed. I'll move forward with the plan? Agreed, they replied in unison. After ending the call, I paced the room while Michaela watched me with concern. What's next? She asked. Next, I need to meet with the town planning board to ensure there are no hidden obstacles. Then, assuming that goes well, I'll need to start interviewing local contractors for the renovations. And your parents? Her gentle probe went to the heart of what I was carefully avoiding. I stopped pacing. I need more time to think about that. The clock is ticking, Aisha. We're supposed to leave tomorrow afternoon. She was right. If I wanted to move forward with my plan, I needed to have difficult conversations, and soon. I'll call Tariq, I decided. Ask him to arrange a meeting with my parents tomorrow morning. While Michaela ordered room service, I stepped into the hall to make the call. Tariq answered immediately. Did you read it? He asked without preamble. Yes. I didn't elaborate, unsure how to articulate my tangled emotions. And it's complicated. Look, I need to see them again before I leave town. Can you arrange it? Maybe at their apartment, where we can speak privately. Of course. The relief in his voice was palpable. What time? 9 tomorrow morning? I have meetings with local officials afterward. I'll make it happen, he promised. Can I tell them what it's about? I hesitated. Just say I want to discuss the house. Nothing more. After hanging up, I spent hours refining my plan, researching local regulations, and preparing the presentation I would need for the planning board. Working gave me purpose, a way to channel the emotional turbulence into something productive. By the time I finally fell asleep, it was past midnight, my father's letter still on the nightstand, its words etched in my mind. Morning came too quickly. I dressed with particular care, choosing a professional outfit that conveyed confidence without ostentation. Black trousers, a silk blouse, and a tailored blazer, accessorized minimally with the small diamond earrings Michaela had given me for our first anniversary. "You look like you're heading into a high-stakes negotiation," she observed over breakfast. "In a way, I am." I pushed my eggs around my plate, appetite diminished by nerves. "Want me to come with you?" I considered her offer. Having Michaela's steady presence would be comforting, but this was a conversation I needed to have alone. "Thanks, but I think this needs to be just family." "Family," she echoed with a small smile. "That's the first time you've referred to them that way since we arrived." "Old habits," I muttered, though we both knew it was more than that. Tariq texted the address. A small apartment complex on the edge of town, far from the comfortable neighborhood where my family home stood. As I drove there alone, having dropped Michaela at a coffee shop to work remotely, I rehearsed what I would say, how I would present my proposition without seeming either condescending or vulnerable. The building was a plain two-story structure, its beige siding and modest landscaping a far cry from our former home's established elegance. I parked next to Tariq's familiar Honda and took a steadying breath before climbing the exterior stairs. To Unit 2B, Tariq opened the door before I could knock, enfolding me in a quick hug. "They're nervous," he whispered. "Be gentle if you can." The apartment beyond was small but tidy, furnished with a few pieces I recognized from our home. My mother's reading chair, the coffee table my father had built in his brief woodworking, family photos on the walls. My parents stood as I entered, their body language hesitant. "Aisha," my mother said, taking a half step forward as if unsure whether to attempt a hug. She settled for a tight smile instead. "Thank you for coming." "Would you like coffee?" my father asked, formal as if addressing a stranger. "Please," I replied, grateful for the familiar ritual that might ease the initial awkwardness. We settled in the small living room, my parents on the sofa, Tariq and I in adjacent armchairs. The coffee my father served came in mismatched mugs, one of which, ironically, bore the University of Illinois logo. "Tariq said you wanted to discuss the house," my mother began tentatively. "Yes." I set down my mug, gathering my thoughts. "First, I want to acknowledge that I received your letter." I glanced at my father, whose eyes widened slightly. "Tariq gave it to me yesterday." "I see." My father's hands tightened around his mug. "I didn't expect it would ever reach you." "It helped me understand some things," I said carefully. "Though it doesn't change what happened." "Of course not," he agreed quickly. "Nothing can undo that damage." I nodded, appreciating his realism. I've been thinking a lot about the house, and why I felt so compelled to buy it when I saw the listing. At first, I thought it was about reclaiming something that was taken from me. Maybe even about proving a point. My mother winced but remained silent. But being back here, seeing the town, talking with you yesterday, it's made me reconsider my intentions. I leaned forward slightly. "I want to tell you what I'm planning to do with the property, and then I have a proposition for you both." They exchanged glances, clearly bracing for the worst. Nexus Innovations, my company, has a youth initiative called Next Gen. We provide technology education, mentorship, and workspace for underprivileged young people, particularly those from backgrounds where higher education isn't supported or encouraged. Understanding dawned in my father's eyes. "You're turning the house into one of these centers." "Yes, we'll renovate it to include computer labs, meeting spaces, and areas for workshops and classes. Local high school students will be able to use it after school and on weekends. We'll offer scholarships, internships, and direct pathways to tech careers. That's remarkable, my mother said softly. It's fitting, I continued. A place where I was once told I couldn't pursue my dreams will become a place where other young people are encouraged to pursue theirs. My father nodded slowly, pain and pride warring in his expression. It's a worthy purpose, far better than what we used it for. This is where my proposition comes in. I took a deep breath, still uncertain if I was making the right decision. I want to offer you both positions with the center. Stunned silence greeted my words. Positions? My father finally managed. What kind of positions? Dad, you ran a business for 30 years. You know inventory, supply chains, building maintenance, community relations. The center will need someone to handle those aspects. And me? My mother asked, voice barely above a whisper. You were a teacher before you left to help with the store. Your experience would be invaluable for our educational programs. You'd trust us with this? My father sounded incredulous. After everything? Trust needs to be rebuilt on both sides, I acknowledged. These would be trial positions initially, with clear expectations and regular evaluations. You'd report to the center director, not directly to me. Who would that be? My mother asked. I'm speaking with several candidates, including Tariq. I glanced at my cousin, who looked surprised but intrigued. His background in education makes him well qualified, if he's interested. Tariq nodded thoughtfully. I'd certainly consider it. My father set down his mug, hands trembling slightly. Why would you do this, Aisha? Is it pity? No, I said firmly. It's practicality combined with possibility. The center needs staff with local connections. You need employment. And perhaps working towards something meaningful, something that helps other young people avoid the conflicts we couldn't resolve, might be a way forward for all of us. A way forward, my mother repeated, tears gathering in her eyes. I never thought. To be clear, I added, this isn't about erasing the past or pretending those 10 years didn't happen. It's about creating something positive. Despite that history, the personal relationships between us would develop separately from the professional ones, at whatever pace feels right, if at all. You're offering us a job, not necessarily reconciliation, my father clarified. I'm offering an opportunity, with multiple dimensions, I corrected. What we each make of it is up to us. When would this happen? My mother asked, a hint of hope creeping into her voice. Renovations would start after closing, in about 2 weeks. We'd aim to open by fall, in time for the new school year. Training would begin in the interim. I hesitated. There's one more thing. The positions include housing. Housing, my father echoed. There's a carriage house behind the property that we're not using for the center. It needs work, but it's structurally sound. It would be part of your compensation package. My mother pressed a hand to her mouth, overcome. My father stared at me, speechless for perhaps the first time in his life. You don't need to decide immediately, I continued, uncomfortable with their intense emotions. Take some time to think it over. Discuss it privately. I have meetings until late afternoon, but we could talk again this evening. I don't need time, my father said suddenly, his voice rough. I accept. Nathan, my mother cautioned, we should discuss this. What's to discuss? Our daughter is offering us a chance to be part of something important, something that matters. A chance to make some small amends, through action rather than just words. He turned to me, his eyes clear and direct. I accept your terms, Aisha. All of them. Including the understanding that this doesn't automatically fix our relationship. My mother studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. I accept as well, with the same understanding. The decisiveness I'd always admired in my father, when it wasn't being wielded against me, was still present, albeit tempered now by humility. "Good," I said, surprised by the relief that flooded through me. "Tariq can act as liaison while we're setting things up. I'll have contracts drafted and sent over for review." "Contracts," my father mused. "Very professional." "I've learned to protect myself and my interests," I said, a hint of the old hurt surfacing. "As you should," he acknowledged. "We didn't teach you that, but I'm glad you learned it anyway." An awkward silence fell, none of us quite sure how to proceed now that the primary purpose of our meeting had been addressed. "I should get going," I said finally, gathering my purse. "My meeting with the planning board is at 11. My mother stood as I did. "Will we see you again before you leave town?" The question held more weight than its simple words suggested, not just about today or tomorrow, but about the future, about whether the door I'd cracked open might remain so. "Yes," I decided. "Dinner tonight? We could discuss the center in more detail." "We'd like that," she said, relief evident in her voice. As I turned to leave, my father spoke again. "Aisha, thank you, not just for the opportunity, but for considering a different path than the one we showed you." I paused at the door, looking back at these familiar strangers who were my parents. 10 years ago, you said I'd never amount to anything. You were wrong. But proving that wasn't enough. I needed to do something with that success, something meaningful. "You have," my mother said softly. "No," I corrected her. "I'm just beginning." Outside in the morning sunshine, I leaned against my car for a moment, emotions threatening to overwhelm me. The plan I'd conceived in a night of inspiration and determination now felt real, with all its potential and its risks. I was committing significant resources, financial and emotional, to a project intertwined with my most painful memories. Tariq emerged from the apartment, joining me by the car. "That was unexpected," he said. "For me too, honestly. I didn't finalize the plan until last night." "Are you sure about this? Working with them won't be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," I replied, echoing one of my father's own frequent sayings. "Besides, they'll be accountable to the center director, not to me directly." Tariq smiled slightly. "About that, were you serious about considering me for the position?" "Completely serious. You have the educational background, community connections, and personal investment in the mission. Plus, you're one of the few people who understands all the complex dynamics at play." "I'd want to finish the school year at Westridge High," he cautioned. "That's another 6 weeks." "That timeline works perfectly with our renovation schedule." I checked my watch. "I really do need to get to that planning board meeting. Can you give me a reading on how they took all this after I left?" He considered for a moment. "Shocked, grateful, wary. Your father is worried it's some kind of test they'll inevitably fail. Your mother is already making plans for educational programs. Both of them seem afraid to hope too much." "That's understandable. What about you, Aisha? What are you hoping for out of this?" It was the question I'd been asking myself since conceiving the plan. Professionally, a successful expansion of our youth initiative into a community that needs it. Personally? I shrugged. "I'm not sure yet. A resolution of some kind, I suppose. Not forgetting or erasing the past, but finding a way to build something new alongside it." "That sounds healthy," Tariq observed. "More healthy than I might have managed in your position." I smiled wryly. "Don't give me too much credit yet. The hard part's still ahead." As I drove toward the town hall for my meeting, I felt a curious lightness despite the complexity of what lay ahead. The strategy I devised wasn't perfect, and its success wasn't guaranteed. But it offered something I hadn't expected to find on this trip. A path forward that honored both the pain of the past and the possibilities of the future. Whether that path would lead to genuine reconciliation remained to be seen. But for the first time in a decade, I was willing to find out. The planning board meeting went more smoothly than I anticipated. Westridge, like many small Midwestern towns, had been losing population and businesses for years. My proposal to bring a technology education center, with its jobs, educational opportunities, and potential to attract visitors, was met with enthusiasm bordering on desperation. "This is exactly the kind of investment Westridge needs," said Harold Winters, the board chairman, after I finished my presentation. "Young people leave for cities like Chicago because there's nothing for them here. This could help change that narrative." The board voted unanimously to approve the preliminary plan, pending standard inspections and permit applications. As I gathered my materials, several members approached to introduce themselves, including a woman about my age who looked vaguely familiar. "Aisha Thompson," she said, extending her hand. "I'm not sure if you remember me. Brooke Ellison? We were in AP chemistry together." The name clicked. "Of course. You won the state science fair senior year." She smiled, pleased I remembered. "That feels like a lifetime ago. I'm the town's economic development officer now. This project of yours? It could be transformative for Westridge." "That's the goal," I replied. "Word travels fast here," she continued, lowering her voice. "People are talking about you buying your parents' house. Some think it's a revenge play." I tensed. "And what do you think?" "I think you're too smart for something that petty." She handed me her business card. "Call me if you encounter any roadblocks. I want to see this succeed." Outside the town hall, I checked my phone to find multiple text messages from Michaela. Darius called. "Board approved additional funding for Westridge project. Got us dinner reservations at Antonio's for tonight. Private room. Asked if you wanted to invite your parents. Your mother just came into the coffee shop. She's 2 tables away and hasn't seen me. What should I do?" The last message had come only 10 minutes ago. I replied immediately. "Introduce yourself if it feels right. I'm heading there now." When I arrived at the coffee shop, I found Michaela and my mother deep in conversation at a corner table, heads bent together over what appeared to be architectural sketches. They looked up as I approached, an odd pairing that somehow seemed natural despite the circumstances. "Aisha," my mother greeted me, eyes bright with excitement. "Michaela's been showing me the plans for similar centers in Seattle and Portland. They're remarkable." "She's had some excellent suggestions for the educational spaces," Michaela added, her expression conveying that my mother had surprised her in a positive way. I slid into the empty chair, unsure how to navigate this unexpected alliance. "I just came from the planning board. We got preliminary approval." "That's wonderful news," my mother said. "I've been telling Michaela about the local school system, the challenges they face with technology education." The eager way she leaned forward, the animated gestures as she spoke. These were glimpses of the mother I remembered from early childhood, before financial stress and my father's rigidity had dimmed her enthusiasm. The woman who had once taught 3rd grade with passion before leaving to help save the failing hardware store. "Patricia has insights that could be valuable for customizing the programs to local needs," Michaela observed, using my mother's first name with an ease that startled me. "I'm glad you two had a chance to talk," I said carefully. My mother sensed my reserve. "I hope you don't mind. I came to pick up coffee for your father and myself, and I recognized Michaela from yesterday." "Of course I don't mind," I assured her, though the reality was more complicated. I'd envisioned maintaining clear boundaries between my personal and professional relationships with my parents. Seeing Michaela and my mother conversing like colleagues disrupted that compartmentalization. "I should get this coffee back to your father," my mother said, gathering her things. "He's at the apartment, making calls about the carriage house. He thinks it needs a new roof before winter." "Already planning renovations?" I asked, both amused and disconcerted by his presumption. You know your father. Always looking ahead. To the next project. She hesitated. We're looking forward to dinner tonight. Antonio's at 7, Michaela said. Yes, that's right. After she left, Michaela raised an eyebrow at me. She's not what I expected. What did you expect? Based on your descriptions? Someone colder, more rigid. She seems eager to make amends. She always was the more flexible one, I acknowledged, until it mattered most. Michaela gathered her laptop and notebooks. I need to run a video conference with my firm at 2. Meet you back at the hotel afterward? Once alone, I ordered another coffee and tried to work, but found myself instead scrolling through local social media groups. Word of my return and the planned technology center had indeed spread quickly. Most comments expressed excitement about the investment in Westridge, but some speculated about my real motivations. Heard the Thompson girl bought her parents' house out of spite. Cold. Nathan Thompson finally getting his comeuppance after years of looking down on everyone else. Wonder if Aisha Thompson remembers who helped her when her parents kicked her out. Those same kids could use a break now. The last comment caught my attention. It was from Maya's younger sister, Zoe, who had witnessed the aftermath of my expulsion firsthand. Her point was valid. The center should prioritize serving local kids who faced the same barriers I had. I was making notes about potential community partnerships when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Thinking it might be related to the planning board, I answered. Is this Aisha Thompson? An unfamiliar male voice asked. Yes, who's calling? This is Frank Wilson from the Westridge Weekly. We're running a story about your purchase of your parents' foreclosed home and the planned technology center. Care to comment? My stomach tightened. A newspaper story would accelerate already rampant speculation and potentially complicate the delicate balance I was trying to establish. The center is still in the planning stages, I replied neutrally. We're excited about the opportunity to bring technology education resources to Westridge. Sources tell us you haven't spoken to your parents in a decade, since they allegedly threw you out for wanting to attend college. Now you're buying their foreclosed home. Seems like there's more to the story than a simple business investment. The directness of his question caught me off guard. Who I speak to or don't speak to is my private business, Mr. Wilson. Not when it involves prominent local residents and a significant property transaction. His tone hardened. We're running the story tomorrow, Ms. Thompson. It would be better to have your perspective included. Trapped, I chose my words carefully. The Technology Center represents a positive investment in Westridge's future. Its location was chosen for practical reasons. Any personal history associated with the property is secondary to its potential community impact. And your parents? How do they feel about you buying their home? You'd have to ask them, I deflected. We have. Your father declined to comment. Your mother said, and I quote, "We're proud of Aisha's success and grateful for her investment in Westridge." Care to respond to that? The statement surprised me. Proud? Grateful? These were not words I'd expected from either of them. I have nothing to add, I finally said. One last question. Several former classmates mentioned you were homeless for a time after leaving home. Any comment on how that experience influenced your current success in this project? The question hit uncomfortably close to my motivations. The center's mission is to ensure other young people have the resources and support they need to pursue their educational and career goals, regardless of circumstances. My personal experiences inform that mission. That's all I'll say on the matter. After ending the call, I sat motionless, anxiety building. The newspaper story would force the private aspects of this situation into public view, creating pressure I hadn't anticipated. What had begun as a personal reckoning was rapidly evolving into community drama. I called Tariq. Have you heard from a reporter named Frank Wilson? I asked when he answered. Just got off the phone with him, Tariq confirmed. He's digging into everything. Great, I muttered. Just what we need. It was inevitable, Aisha. You're successful, visible, and your story has inherent drama. Add a technology center that could help revitalize a struggling town, and it's front-page news. The timing is terrible. We're still figuring out our own dynamics, and now everything will be public before we've even established basic terms. Maybe that's not entirely bad, Tariq suggested. Public accountability could help maintain momentum. Once everyone knows the plan, it's harder to back out. He had a point, though the prospect of having my personal history dissected in the local paper remained deeply uncomfortable. Have you talked to your parents about this? The reporter? Not yet. We're having dinner tonight. I hesitated. Tariq, be honest. How likely is it that my father will lose his temper publicly now that this is getting attention? A year ago? Almost certain. Now? He considered. Less likely. The depression changed him. He's more subdued. But pressure can bring out old patterns. That's what I'm afraid of. I glanced at my watch. I should get back to the hotel. I have more calls to make before dinner. As I walked back through town, I noticed people watching me, some nodding in recognition, others whispering as I passed. The cocoon of anonymity I'd enjoyed in Seattle was impossible here, where my history was common knowledge and my presence noteworthy. At the hotel, I found Michaela still on her video conference, speaking in the measured tones she reserved for difficult negotiations. She muted her microphone as I entered. Everything okay? You look stressed. Local newspaper is running a story tomorrow about the house purchase and my history with my parents. She winced. Complications? Potentially? I'm not sure how my father will react to public scrutiny. He's always been volatile when feeling exposed or criticized. Want me to run interference at dinner? I smiled at her protective instinct. No, but thanks. I need to handle this directly. My phone buzzed with an email from the planning board, the official approval letter, along with permit applications for the renovations. Progress continued despite the emotional turbulence. As evening approached, I dressed with particular care, armor against the vulnerability of another family dinner after so many years. Michaela watched from the bathroom doorway as I applied my makeup with methodical precision. You don't have to be perfect tonight, she said gently. It's just dinner. It's never just dinner with them, I replied, adding another coat of mascara. Especially now with reporters calling and the whole town watching. What are you most afraid of? The question stopped me mid-motion, mascara wand hovering. That he'll revert to type. Say something unforgivable. Confirm that nothing has really changed. And if he does, then at least I'll know, better than wondering. At Antonio's, we were shown to a private dining room at the back of the restaurant. My parents were already seated. My father looking uncomfortable in a button-down shirt I didn't recognize. My mother wearing a necklace I remembered from special occasions in my childhood. You look beautiful, my mother said as I took my seat. Thank you. I smoothed my dress, an unconscious gesture of self-consciousness. Have you ordered drinks? Just water, my father said. I don't. He trailed off, then started again. I stopped drinking. After the store closed. Part of the, recovery process. This admission, offered awkwardly but voluntarily, caught me by surprise. Alcohol had been a consistent presence in our home, my father's evening whiskeys progressing from one to several as business pressures mounted. That's good, I said, unsure how to respond more meaningfully. The waiter arrived, breaking the tension as we ordered drinks and appetizers. Once he departed, my father leaned forward. A reporter called me today. Frank Wilson from The Weekly. Me too, I acknowledged. They're running a story tomorrow. He asked some pointed questions. My father's jaw tightened, a familiar precursor to anger that made me tense instinctively. But instead of erupting, he took a deep breath. I declined to comment. Didn't trust myself not to say something. Regrettable. I appreciated your mother's statement, I said, turning to her, about being proud and grateful. She reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. It's the truth, though I understand why you might doubt that. The reporter asked about my housing situation after I left. My father flinched visibly. What did you tell him? The truth, that it informs the center's mission. A heavy silence fell, the weight of unspoken history pressing down on the elegant table setting. We didn't know, my mother finally said, voice barely audible. About the park benches, the food pantries. We thought you'd gone straight to college housing. Would it have mattered if you'd known? The question escaped before I could temper it. Yes, my father said firmly, surprising me. Despite what you might believe, we weren't monsters. Stubborn, prideful, wrong, but not intentionally cruel. It felt cruel, I said quietly. Being abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect me. It was cruel, he acknowledged, the admission clearly difficult. Unforgivably so. We've had 10 years to recognize that. The waiter returned with drinks, oblivious to the emotional current running beneath our polite thanks. When he left, again, Michaela deftly steered the conversation toward more practical matters, the renovation timeline, preliminary budgets, staffing needs. My parents engaged eagerly, particularly my mother, who had clearly spent the afternoon researching our other centers. My father asked surprisingly insightful questions about technical specifications and building requirements. As the main courses arrived, I began to relax slightly, lulled by the familiar rhythm of a business discussion. Then my father set down his fork and looked directly at me. There's something you should know before this newspaper article comes out, he said. Something that might explain, though not excuse, what happened 10 years ago. My mother reached for his arm. Nathan, we agreed to wait. She needs to know, Patricia. Especially now. He turned back to me. The real reason the store failed, the reason we were so desperate for you to help us run it, wasn't just competition from the big chains. I waited, tension returning like an unwelcome guest. I made some poor investments, borrowed against the business, against the house. He swallowed hard. I was trying to expand, to compete, but I overextended. By the time you got your scholarship, we were already in serious trouble. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Pride, shame, fear of losing your respect. He shook his head. I couldn't admit I'd failed, so I lashed out when you chose a different path. Blamed you instead of myself. The revelation shifted something fundamental in my understanding of what had happened. Not just a clash of values or expectations, but desperation born of financial ruin. That doesn't make it right, he continued. Nothing could. But when that reporter asks people about us, about the store closing, about what happened with you, the real story isn't just an uncompromising father. It's a man who made bad decisions and couldn't face them. My mother's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. We wanted to protect you from it. Then we ended up hurting you worse than the truth ever could have. Before I could formulate a response, my phone buzzed with a text from Darius. Just heard from Westridge Weekly. They're running story tomorrow a.m., full page. Calling it, Prodigal Daughter Returns. Tech Success Story Brings Innovation to Hometown. They're painting it as redemption narrative. The implication was clear. The article would cast me as the returning hero, my parents as supporting characters in my success story. It would simplify a complex, painful history into an uplifting tale of triumph over adversity. I showed the text to Michaela, whose eyebrows rose. Then, after a moment's consideration, I passed it to my father. He read it, expression unreadable. then handed it to my mother. "So that's how they're playing it," he said flatly. "It's not how I would have chosen to frame it," I assured him. "No?" A hint of the old skepticism colored his tone. "Isn't that exactly what this is? Your triumphant return, the successful daughter proving her father wrong?" The accusation stung, partly because it contained a grain of truth. "That's not what the center is about. Isn't it? Even a little?" He leaned forward. "Be honest, Aisha. When you saw our house in foreclosure, wasn't there a moment of satisfaction?" "Nathan," my mother cautioned. "No, I want to know. Because if we're going to work together, if we're going to try to build something new, we need honesty. Complete honesty." Michaela tensed beside me, ready to intervene if needed. But this was my conversation, my reckoning. "Yes," I admitted, meeting his gaze directly. There was satisfaction, relief, even. Proof that I hadn't been wrong to choose my own path. That doesn't mean I'm happy about your suffering, but I won't pretend I didn't feel vindicated. He nodded slowly, not angry, but thoughtful. "Thank you for that honesty. I deserved that moment of vindication 10 years ago. You've earned it now." The waiter appeared again, offering dessert menus that we all declined. As we waited for the check, my father spoke again, his voice softer than before. "This newspaper article tomorrow, it's going to simplify things. Make you the hero, probably make us the villains. The truth is messier." "Most truths are," I agreed. "Whatever they print, know this." He met my eyes directly. "I am proud of you. Not just your success, but your resilience, your character. The fact that you're trying to create something positive here instead of just walking away, which you had every right to do." Coming from him, the man who had once told me I'd never amount to anything, these words carried a weight that threatened to overwhelm me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Outside the restaurant, the night air cool against my flushed skin, my mother hugged me briefly before they departed. My father hesitated, then extended his hand, which I shook. A formal gesture, but a point of contact nonetheless. As Michaela and I walked back to our hotel, she asked, "How are you feeling about tomorrow? The article, the public attention?" I considered the question, sorting through the tangle of emotions. Exposed, uncertain, but also ready, maybe, to have it all out in the open. "And your parents? Do you believe what your father said about being proud of you?" The streetlights cast our shadows long on the sidewalk, overlapping and then separating as we walked. I believe he believes it now. Whether that belief withstands public scrutiny, the stress of working together, the inevitable tensions ahead. I shrugged. That remains to be seen. "You're taking a significant risk," she observed, "professionally and personally." "The best investments usually are risky," I replied, echoing another of my father's business maxims. "But they're calculated risks, based on careful assessment." "And what does your assessment tell you about this one?" I thought about my parents at dinner, my father's painful honesty, my mother's hopeful engagement, about Tariq's willingness to consider directing the center, about the town's need for exactly the resources we could provide. That it's worth trying, I finally said. That creating something new might be better than just proving them wrong. As we reached the hotel, my phone buzzed with another text. From Tariq this time. "Reporter sent me advance copy of article. It's actually balanced, acknowledges family conflict, but focuses on center's potential impact. Your father comes off as flawed but redemptive. You might be surprised." I showed Michaela the message, feeling an unexpected lightness. Maybe this won't be the disaster I feared. She smiled, squeezing my hand. The difference between a disaster and an opportunity is often just perspective. "Now you sound like a motivational poster," I teased. I must be spending too much time with tech entrepreneurs, she countered, making me laugh. Inside our room, I found myself drawn to the window, looking out at the small town that had shaped me, for better and worse. Tomorrow its residents would read about my return, form opinions, take sides. The private pain and tentative reconciliation we'd begun would become public property, subject to scrutiny and judgment. But perhaps that publicity would also create accountability, as Tariq had suggested. Perhaps seeing our story through others' eyes would help us all recognize what was at stake. Not just a business venture or family drama, but the chance to transform failure into opportunity, hurt into healing. It was a risk worth taking. A calculated investment in possibility. And for the first time since seeing that real estate listing on my computer screen, I felt not just vindication or satisfaction, but hope. Cautious, but genuine. Hope that what had been broken might yet be rebuilt into something stronger, if not the same. The morning of our departure, I woke before sunrise, anxiety propelling me from troubled sleep. Careful not to disturb Michaela, I slipped from bed and made coffee using the hotel room's single-serve machine. With the first bitter sip warming my hands, I opened my laptop to check the Westridge Weekly's website. There it was, prominently displayed on the homepage. Prodigal daughter returns. Tech success story brings innovation to hometown. Beneath the headline was a photo I didn't remember being taken. Me standing on the town hall steps after the planning board meeting, looking confident and professional. The subtitle read, "After 10-year absence, Aisha Thompson returns to transform family home into technology center." Taking a deep breath, I began to read. The article was surprisingly nuanced. Frank Wilson had done his research, interviewing former teachers, classmates, and neighbors to piece together both my departure and the trajectory of my career since. He referenced the family conflict that led to my leaving town, but didn't sensationalize it, instead focusing on how that experience had informed my company's mission to support young people in pursuing technology careers. My father was quoted, briefly, his words carefully measured. "Aisha has achieved everything through her own determination and talent. We're grateful she's chosen to bring those resources back to Westridge." My mother's contribution was more extensive, explaining the educational programs planned for the center with genuine enthusiasm. There was no mention of their working for the center, suggesting they'd kept that arrangement private for now. Most encouraging was the community response. Local educators expressed excitement about the opportunities the center would provide their students. Business owners anticipated the economic boost from visitors and new jobs. Even my old boss at the grocery store, where I'd worked part-time in high school, recalled me as always ambitious, always thinking bigger than Westridge. The article concluded with a quote from Tariq. "This technology center represents not just an investment in Westridge's economy, but in its young people. It's about creating opportunities that might keep our brightest talents here, building our community's future." Scrolling to the comments section, I braced for negativity, but found largely positive reactions. A few respondents questioned my motives or referenced old town gossip about my departure, but they were quickly countered by supportive voices. "This seems good?" Michaela said from behind me, reading over my shoulder as she sipped her own coffee. "Surprisingly so," I agreed. I was expecting something more sensational. Small towns can surprise you, especially when you're offering something they desperately need. My phone buzzed with a text from Tariq. "Have you seen it?" "Not bad, right?" Before I could respond, another message appeared. This one from my father. "Fair article. Still okay for us to meet you at the airport?" This was unexpected. We'd planned to say our goodbyes last night, leaving early this morning without further interaction. The prospect of my parents coming to the small regional airport to see us off, a normal family ritual that had never been part of our experience, felt strangely significant. What do you think? I asked Michaela, showing her the text. It's up to you, she said. But it seems like a positive gesture. I typed back, flight's at 11:20. If you want to meet at 10, there's a coffee shop near security. His response came immediately. We'll be there. As we packed our belongings, my phone continued to buzz with notifications, emails responding to the article, messages from old classmates who'd seen it, a particularly enthusiastic note from Brooke. Ellison at the Economic Development Office expressing her department's full support. You've stirred up quite the hornet's nest here, Michaela observed as she folded her clothes with practiced efficiency. For better or worse, I agreed. Though it seems mostly better, at least for now. Are you having second thoughts about any of it? The center? Your parents' involvement? I considered the question as I zipped my suitcase. Not second thoughts? Exactly, just awareness of the complexity, the risks. Calculated risks, she reminded me, echoing my words from the night before. At the airport, we checked our bags and made our way to the small coffee shop near the security checkpoint. My parents were already there, my mother fidgeting with a paper napkin, my father scanning headlines on his phone. They stood as we approached, the awkwardness of our new dynamic still evident in their hesitant smiles and careful posture. Good morning, my mother greeted us. Did you see the article? We did, I confirmed, sliding into a chair across from them. It was surprisingly balanced. Frank's a good reporter, my father said. Old school, cares about facts more than sensation. We ordered coffee and pastries, the mundane transaction providing a comfortable script to follow. Once the server departed, my father cleared his throat. We've been discussing the center plans, he said. Your mother had some thoughts about local partnerships that might be valuable. The community college has a small IT program, she explained. Nothing advanced, but they might provide entry-level certificates that could feed into your more specialized training. That's an excellent idea, I said, genuinely impressed by her initiative. We should connect their department chair with our curriculum team. My mother beamed at the approval. I've already reached out. Dean Michaels says he'd be happy to collaborate. The ease with which she'd slipped into her role, already making connections and thinking strategically, reminded me of her competence before my father's business troubles had consumed her energy and confidence. The articles generated significant interest, I told them. I've received emails from several local businesses asking about sponsorship opportunities. That's good, my father said. Local buy-in will be crucial for sustainability. We continued discussing operational details, the conversation flowing more naturally than any we'd had since my return. It struck me that we were most comfortable when focused on the project, the neutral territory where our skills and interests could interact without directly confronting our painful history. As our departure time approached, the conversation inevitably shifted to more personal matters. When will you be back? My mother asked, trying to sound casual though the question's weight was evident. 2 weeks for the closing, I replied. Then regularly during the renovation phase, probably every other week at first. We'll have the carriage house assessment completed by then, my father said. Initial estimates suggest the repairs are manageable within the budget you outlined. Again, his focus on practical matters rather than emotions, so characteristic of how he'd always operated. I've drafted preliminary contracts for your positions, I told them, keeping my tone equally businesslike. I'll email them for review before the closing. Tariq will act as interim director until we make a final hiring decision. My mother nodded, but a shadow crossed her face. And after the center opens? How involved will you be in day-to-day operations? The real question beneath her words was clear. How much would they see me? Was this professional relationship a path to rebuilding a personal one, or simply a business arrangement? I'll oversee the launch phase directly, I said carefully. After that, I'll visit regularly for board meetings and program evaluations. The Seattle operation requires most of my attention. Of course, she said. disappointment evident despite her attempt to hide it. My father, surprisingly, was the one to address the emotional subtext. What your mother is really asking, Aisha, is whether this project is just business for you or something more. The directness of his statement caught me off guard. It's both, I admitted after a moment. The center aligns with our company mission and makes business sense. But I could have built it anywhere. I chose Westridge, chose that house, for personal reasons too. Closure? My father suggested. Initially, maybe. Now, I'm not sure. Maybe something closer to reclamation. Reclaiming what was taken from you, he said, understanding in his eyes. Not just that. Reclaiming possibility. The possibility of what that house could be. What Westridge could be. What we... I hesitated, the words still difficult to speak. What we could be, perhaps. Eventually. My mother reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. The same hesitation she'd shown at dinner. This time I bridged the gap, touching her fingers briefly. I'm not promising anything, I cautioned. 10 years can't be erased by a few days of civil conversation and business plans. We understand, my father said, his voice rough with emotion. We're grateful for whatever you're willing to offer. The airport announcement system chimed, calling for boarding of our flight. As we stood to leave, an awkward moment ensued. The traditional farewell hug inappropriate given our tentative reconnection, yet a simple handshake insufficient for the complex emotions at play. My mother solved the dilemma by offering her hand, first, then pulling me into a brief, gentle embrace when I took it. Safe travels, she whispered. Thank you for everything. My father didn't attempt physical contact, respecting boundaries I hadn't explicitly stated but he clearly sensed. Instead, he nodded formally. We'll send updates on the carriage house progress. And he hesitated, then continued with determined honesty. I'll continue my therapy sessions. They're helping me address the anger issues that contributed to what happened. This voluntary disclosure of his efforts toward personal change affected me more deeply than any apology or promise could have. It represented not words but actions, tangible evidence of his commitment to being different than the man who had cast me out a decade ago. Thank you for telling me that, I said simply. As Michaela and I walked toward security, I glanced back to see them still standing there, watching us leave. My mother leaning slightly against my father, his arm around her shoulders. They looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than the towering figures of authority they'd been in my childhood. Are you okay? Michaela asked softly as we joined the security line. I think so, I said, surprised to find it was true. It feels unfinished, but not in a bad way. Like we've opened a door but haven't decided yet whether to walk through it. Once through security, while waiting at our gate, I received a final text from my father. Found this while clearing out storage yesterday. Thought you might want it. For the center. Attached was a photo of my high school robotics team trophy, the one I'd won senior year for a programmable prosthetic hand prototype. I'd been forced to leave it behind in the hasty evacuation of my belongings. They kept it, I texted Michaela, who was getting coffee nearby. All this time, they kept it. She returned, handing me a cup. Is that significant? They told me they'd erased all traces of me, I explained. Converted my room immediately, but they kept this hidden away somewhere. Maybe they couldn't bear to part with everything, she suggested. On the plane, as we gained altitude, I watched Westridge recede. Below us, the town square, the school, the river, and somewhere among the residential streets, the house that had been my childhood home, then the site of my greatest trauma, and now the focus of my most ambitious project. In 2 weeks, I would return not as a visitor, but as the owner of that property. The bank paperwork would be finalized, the deed transferred to my name. The physical reclamation would be complete. The emotional reclamation of my history, my relationship with my parents, my connection to the town that had shaped me, remained a work in progress. But for the first time since leaving a decade ago, I could envision a path forward that honored both the pain of the past and the possibility of the future. As the seatbelt sign dinged off, I opened my laptop to find an email from Darius with the subject line, Westridge Center, Phase 1, budget approved. Attached was a preliminary construction, timeline, architectural renderings, and staffing projections. Work already? Michaela asked, glancing at my screen. The next phase, I corrected her, clicking through the detailed plans for transforming my former home into a space where young people would find the support and resources I'd been denied. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. My parents had once told me I'd never amount to anything, driving me from the house with that prediction ringing in my ears. Now, that same house would become a place where young people were told daily that they could amount to anything they dreamed, with the right support and opportunities. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. The hurt ran too deep for simple forgiveness. It was something more complex, a transmutation of pain into purpose, of rejection into reclamation. And perhaps in that transformation, all of us might find a measure of healing. The 2 weeks between my departure from Westridge and my return for the closing passed in a blur of activity. Back in Seattle, I threw myself into preparations for the technology center, working closely with our design team to refine floor plans that would honor the house's original character while transforming it for its new purpose. You're obsessing, Darius observed one evening, finding me still at my desk well past 9, surrounded by material samples and equipment specifications. I want it to be perfect, I admitted, rubbing my tired eyes. Perfect or perfectly controlled, he countered gently. You've overseen 5 center launches before. This one's different. Of course it's different. It's personal, he finished for me, which means you need perspective even more than usual. He was right, of course. Every decision about the Westridge Center carried emotional weight. That clouded my typically clear business judgment. When choosing between 2 equally functional classroom layouts, I found myself wondering which my mother would prefer. When selecting exterior paint colors, I considered whether my father would approve. Have you talked to them since you left? Darius asked, perching on the edge of my desk. Daily updates, I replied. Very professional. The carriage house inspection is complete. Roof needs replacing as expected. Electrical needs updating. They're getting contractor quotes. That's not what I meant. I sighed, knowing what he was asking. No personal conversations, if that's what you're wondering. It's easier to keep things business-focused. Easier, but not necessarily better in the long run. One step at a time, I cautioned. We're still figuring out how to work together professionally. The personal stuff, that's more complicated. Darius nodded, respecting my boundaries as he always had. Just remember that walls work both ways. They keep pain out, but they also keep healing in. The night before my return to Westridge, Michaela found me on our apartment balcony, staring out at the Seattle skyline while clutching a mug of tea. Gone cold. Second thoughts? She asked, wrapping a cardigan around my shoulders against the evening chill. Not about the center, I assured her. That's the right decision, professionally and personally. But tomorrow I legally take possession of my childhood home, the place I was expelled from, the place that shaped me for better and worse. I shook my head, struggling to articulate the complexity of my emotions. It feels momentous, but I don't know exactly what that moment means. It means whatever you decide it means, Michaela said simply. It's your story now. Her words stayed with me on the flight back to Illinois, A reminder that while I couldn't change the past, I held the pen for writing what came next. This time I flew alone. Michaela needed in court for an important case and rented a more modest car than before. My hotel reservation had been canceled. I would be staying in a guest room at Tariq's house instead, at his and his wife Layla's insistence. Family should stay with family, he'd said when arranging it, the word family carrying new resonance in the context of our evolving relationships. Tariq met me at the airport, greeting me with the easy affection that had characterized our childhood relationship. "Welcome back, cousin," he said, taking my bag. "Ready for the big day?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. On the drive to Westridge, he updated me on developments since my departure. The newspaper article had continued to generate positive buzz in the community. The local school board had unanimously approved a partnership proposal, allowing high school students to earn credits through center programs. 3 technology companies with Chicago offices had expressed interest in providing internship opportunities for center participants. "Your parents have been surprisingly effective ambassadors," Tariq noted. "Your mother's connected to every educator in town, and your father knows all the business owners. They've been leveraging those relationships nonstop." "That's good," I said cautiously. "They're committed, Aisha. Whatever their initial reactions, they've fully embraced the center's mission now." "Let's see if that enthusiasm survives actually working together," I cautioned. At Tariq's home, I was warmly welcomed by Layla and their 2 children, 9-year-old Amira and 7-year-old Zayn, who were bursting with questions about Seattle and my technology company. "Do you make robots?" Zayn asked eagerly over dinner. "Some of our startup companies do," I told him. "We help them get started and find investors." "Could I visit someday?" Amira asked. "I'm learning coding at school, and Mrs. Reynolds says I have a natural aptitude." "Absolutely," I promised. "In fact, you'll be able to take advanced classes at the center once it opens." "The one in your old house," she said. "Mom explained that it used to be your home and now you're turning it into a place for kids to learn." "That's right," I confirmed, impressed by her understanding. "But why did you leave Westridge?" Zayn asked innocently. "Didn't you like it here?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the adult portion of the table. Tariq and Layla exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to navigate this delicate territory. "I left to go to college," I said finally, offering a simplified truth, "to study computers and technology, and then I stayed away to build my company." "But now you're coming back," Amira observed brightly. "So it has a happy ending." Her childish optimism brought an unexpected lump to my throat. "We're still working on the ending," I told her, "but I think it might be a good one." After the children were in bed, Tariq, Layla, and I sat in their comfortable living room, discussing final details for tomorrow's closing. "Your parents asked if they should attend," Tariq mentioned casually. "I told them it was your decision." "What did they want to do?" I asked, curious about their perspective. "They weren't sure. Your father thought it might be awkward, given the circumstances. Your mother worried their presence might make a difficult day harder for you." I considered this thoughtfulness, so different from the self-centered perspectives that had characterized their parenting in my teenage years. "Tell them they can come if they want to," I decided. It might be appropriate somehow. A symbolic handover. Tariq nodded approvingly. "I'll let them know." The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect early autumn day. I dressed with care in a burgundy suit that projected confidence without ostentation, steeling myself for what would undoubtedly be an emotionally charged experience. The closing was scheduled for 10 o'clock at the bank. When I arrived with Tariq, my parents were already there, seated in the waiting area. My mother wore a simple dress I didn't recognize. My father, a button-down shirt and khakis that looked newly purchased. Both stood as we approached, their nervous energy palpable. "Good morning," my father greeted us, his formal tone belying the significance of the occasion. "Did you sleep well?" my mother asked, her default question when unsure what else to say. "Well enough," I replied. "Are the contractors scheduled for the carriage house?" "Starting Monday," she confirmed eagerly. "The roof repair first, then electrical. Should be habitable within 3 weeks, they estimate." Vanessa Klein appeared, ushering us into a conference room where documents awaited signatures. The process was straightforward but lengthy, with multiple papers requiring my attention. Throughout, my parents sat quietly, witnesses to the legal transfer of the property that had been their home for over 25 years. When the final document was signed, Vanessa smiled professionally. "Congratulations, Ms. Thompson. The property is officially yours." My father's sharp intake of breath was barely audible, but I caught it. The small sound conveying the emotional impact of this final severing of his connection to the house he'd lost. "If you'd like to do a final walkthrough, the property is vacant and available," Vanessa continued. "The keys are yours to keep." She handed me a set of keys, new ones, not the original I still carried, and excused herself, leaving the 4 of us in momentary silence. "Would you like to see it?" I asked my parents, unsure what protocol existed for such unusual circumstances. "If you wouldn't mind," my mother replied hesitantly. "It would be closure, I suppose." The drive to Maple Avenue was silent, each of us lost in thought. As we pulled into the driveway, I was struck again by the house's deteriorated condition: peeling, paint, overgrown landscaping, the general air of neglect that comes from financial distress followed by vacancy. "It looks worse than I remembered," my mother murmured as we approached the front door. "It'll look better soon," I assured her. "The renovation team arrives next week." Using the new keys felt strangely formal, given that I still possessed the original. Inside, emptiness amplified our footsteps as we moved through the rooms where we had once lived as a family. "The design team has created renderings of each space," I explained, partly to fill the awkward silence. "The living room will become a collaborative workspace. The dining room, a conference area. The kitchen will remain functional, but modernized for classes and community events." My parents nodded, absorbing my words, but clearly experiencing their own private journey through memories as we moved from room to room. Upstairs, my mother paused outside what had been my bedroom. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the door. I nodded, following her inside. The room was completely empty. The built-in shelves my father had installed for my books now bare, the walls an impersonal beige. "We painted it after you left," she said softly. "Nathan thought it would be easier if it didn't look like your room anymore." "I remember," I said. "You told me you'd erased all traces of me." She winced at the harsh memory. "We were wrong. So wrong, in so many ways." "This room will become a computer lab," I said, redirecting the conversation to safer territory. "Workstations along the walls, central table for group projects. It gets the best natural light in the house," she observed. "Perfect for a classroom." We rejoined Tariq and my father in the hallway, continuing our tour through the remaining bedrooms, each now designated for specific educational functions. Finally, we stood in the backyard, looking at the carriage house, a charming but neglected structure that had served as storage and my father's occasional workshop during my childhood. "The roof definitely needs work," my father noted, professional assessment displacing emotion. "But the foundation looks solid. Good bones." "That was your phrase whenever we looked at houses," I recalled. "Good bones. You said it was the most important consideration because everything else could be fixed." He nodded, something like pleasure flickering across his face at this shared memory. "Still true. This place has good bones. The center will stand for generations." His words carried unintentional weight, the implication that what we were building now might outlast all of us, might become a legacy beyond our individual lifespans or grievances. "I have another meeting in town," I said, checking my watch. With Brooke Ellison from Economic Development. We're discussing potential grant opportunities. Of course, my mother said quickly. We don't want to keep you. As we walked back toward our cars, my father hesitated, then spoke. Aisha, would you... That is, if you're free. Your mother and I would like to invite you to dinner tonight. At our apartment. Nothing formal, just a meal. The invitation was clearly significant to him, costing him pride to extend. I glanced at Tarek, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how genuinely I meant it. What time? 7? My mother suggested, hope brightening her face. Nothing fancy, just family dinner. Family dinner. The phrase hung in the air between us, charged with meaning and memory. 7 works, I confirmed. I'll bring dessert. As they drove away, Tariq turned to me with raised eyebrows. Family dinner? That's a big step. It's just a meal, I said, downplaying the significance. No, it's not. And you know it. He smiled gently. It's okay to admit this matters, Aisha. That they matter still, despite everything. I'm not sure what I'm ready to admit yet, I replied honestly. But I'm willing to find out. At the Economic Development office, Brooke Ellison greeted me with professional enthusiasm, presenting a detailed analysis of grant opportunities for which the center might qualify. The timing couldn't be better, she explained. There's federal funding specifically for rural technology education initiatives. Your center meets all the criteria. That's excellent news, I said, reviewing the materials she'd prepared. The additional funding would allow us to expand programming more quickly than projected. How are things going with your parents? She asked, the abrupt shift to personal matters catching me off guard. The town's been talking, as you might imagine. I'm sure it has, I said carefully. Things are evolving. They'll be working with the center once it opens. That's been the biggest surprise for most people, she admitted. Not that you came back or bought the house, though that made for good gossip, but that you're all working together after what happened. How much do people actually know about what happened? I asked, curious about the town's perspective on my departure. Different versions circulated, she said. Some said you ran away, others that your parents threw you out over a boyfriend they disapproved of. The truth about the scholarship and your career choice didn't emerge until much later, when your name started appearing in business journals. And now? What's the narrative now? Redemption, she said simply. The prodigal daughter returns, not to seek revenge, but to create something valuable for the community. It's a story people want to believe in. Even if it's more complicated than that, especially then, she said wisely. Most meaningful things are complicated. After the meeting, I spent the afternoon on video calls with the Seattle office, approving final equipment orders and staffing proposals for the center. At 6:30, I stopped by a local bakery to purchase dessert for dinner, a blackberry pie, my father's favorite from childhood. Standing on the doorstep of my parents' apartment at precisely 7 o'clock, pie in hand, I experienced a sense of disorientation so profound it was almost physical. The last time I'd shared a meal with them in their home had been the night everything fell apart, the night that had altered the trajectory of all our lives. I knocked, and the door opened immediately, as if they'd been waiting just inside. Welcome, my mother said, the simple greeting laden with meaning beyond its everyday use. Please, come in. The apartment was modest, but had been prepared with obvious care. The table was set with what I recognized as their good dishes, wedding, gifts that had been reserved for holidays and special occasions during my childhood. Fresh flowers brightened the center of the table. Something savory simmered on the stove, filling the small space with comforting aromas. Beef stew? my father explained, noting my appreciative sniff. Your favorite, if I remember correctly. Still is, I confirmed, touched that he'd remembered this detail across a decade of separation. And blackberry pie, my mother observed, as I set the dessert on the counter. Your father's favorite. Some things stick with you, I said, the simple statement encompassing far more than food preferences. As we settled around the table, the initial awkwardness I'd feared gave way to something different. A tentative but genuine effort from all sides to connect across the chasm of our shared history. My mother served the stew, rich with vegetables, and tender beef accompanied by fresh bread from the local bakery. My father poured water, apologizing for the lack of wine with a brief reference to his continued sobriety that I acknowledged with a nod of respect. And then, somehow, we began to talk, not about the center or business matters, but about the past 10 years. They asked thoughtful questions about my education, my early career struggles, how I'd met Darius and formed our company. I found myself sharing stories I'd never expected to tell them, the professor who'd become a mentor, the pitch competition we'd won that provided our first funding, the all-nighters that had produced our breakthrough app. In turn, they spoke candidly about the hardware store's decline, my father's depression after its closure, my mother's return to substitute teaching to make ends meet. There was no self-pity in their accounting, just a straightforward acknowledgement of consequences and adaptations. I started therapy 2 years ago, my father said as we finished the main course. Should have done it decades earlier. Might have saved the store. Might have saved our relationship. What prompted it? I asked, curious about the catalyst for change. Rock bottom, he admitted. After losing the store, I couldn't function, could barely get out of bed. Your mother finally delivered an ultimatum. Get help or she'd leave. I glanced at my mother, surprised. The woman I remembered had rarely stood up to my father's stronger personality. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, she said, meeting my gaze steadily. But watching him destroy himself was harder. The therapist diagnosed clinical depression, my father continued. Said I'd probably had it for years, self-medicating with alcohol and work. The anger, the rigidity, the inability to adapt, all symptoms I'd never recognized. That doesn't excuse what we did to you, my mother added quickly. Nothing could. But it helps explain some of the irrational behavior. The medication helps, my father said. So does the therapy. I'm learning to recognize patterns, to step back when I feel that old rage building. It's a process. This vulnerable disclosure, from the man who had once viewed any admission of weakness as unforgivable, moved me deeply. Thank you for telling me this, I said quietly. It helps me understand too. As we ate the blackberry pie, the conversation shifted to the future. The center's opening timeline, their roles within it, the potential for expansion if initial programs prove successful. We've been talking with local parents, my mother said. The response has been overwhelming. So many families want their children to have technology education but can't afford private classes or equipment. And businesses are interested in potential employees, my father added. The skilled labor shortage here is significant. If the center can train local young people for tech jobs, companies might expand operations rather than relocating. Their enthusiasm was genuine. Their understanding of the center's potential impacts sophisticated. They'd clearly spent the past 2 weeks immersing themselves in research and community outreach, preparing for their roles with a dedication that impressed me. As the evening drew to a close, I helped clear the dishes despite my mother's protests that guests shouldn't clean up. I'm not exactly a guest, I pointed out. I hesitated, searching for the right word to describe what I was to them, now. Not quite daughter in the traditional sense, but no longer the estranged stranger of the past decade either. Family, my father suggested tentatively. However you define that, however you're comfortable defining it. The word hung between us charged with history and hope. Family, I repeated, testing how it felt. I think. I think we're working on that definition. He nodded, accepting this partial answer as the most I could offer in that moment. At the door, as I prepared to leave, my mother handed me a small, carefully wrapped package. "What's this?" I asked, surprised. "Something we thought should return to you," she explained, "especially now, with the center." Curious, I unwrapped it to find a framed certificate, my first-place award from the state computing competition I'd won at 16. The achievement that had cemented my determination to pursue technology as a career, despite my parents' opposition. "You kept this," I said, running my fingers over the glass covering my teenage signature. "We kept everything," my father admitted. "In boxes in storage. Your trophies, certificates, report cards. We couldn't bear to throw them away, even when we were angriest." The revelation struck me deeply. Even at their most rejecting, something in them had recognized the value of preserving evidence of my existence, my achievements. "Thank you," I said simply, rewrapping the frame carefully. "It will have a place of honor at the center." Outside, walking to my car under a sky brilliant with stars rarely visible in Seattle, I found myself thinking not about the past hurts that had driven me for so long, but about the tentative new connections being formed in their wake. The house, my house now, legally and financially, would soon be transformed into something new and purposeful. And perhaps, in parallel, the broken relationships that had centered around that house might also be transformed into something different, but valuable. Not erased or forgotten, but rebuilt with new understanding and stronger foundations. The immediate aftermath of my acquisition wasn't the vindication I'd initially imagined when seeing that foreclosure listing. It was something more complex and ultimately more meaningful, the first careful steps toward reclaiming not just a property, but the possibility of family. However we might eventually define it. 6 months later, the transformation of 4728. Maple Avenue from family home to technology center was complete. Standing on the front lawn amid a crowd of community members gathered for the grand opening, I barely recognized the property that had once been the setting for both my happiest childhood memories and my most painful rejection. The faded exterior had been refreshed with a modern palette of slate blue and crisp white. The overgrown landscaping had given way to thoughtfully designed gardens that would eventually become outdoor classroom spaces. Solar panels gleamed on the south-facing roof, a visible symbol of our commitment to sustainability. Inside, the changes were even more dramatic. Walls had been removed to create open collaborative spaces. The latest technology filled rooms once, cluttered with outdated furniture. The scent of fresh paint and new carpeting had replaced the lingering staleness of a vacant house. And most transformative of all, the energy. Where silence and absence had prevailed, the building now hummed with activity. Local officials and business leaders mingled with educators and community members. Teenagers demonstrated projects at workstations, their excitement palpable as they explained their coding experiments to impressed adults. "It's everything we hoped for," Michaela said, squeezing my hand as we observed the bustling scene. She had flown in the previous day for the opening, her presence a steady anchor amid the emotional currents of the occasion. "More than I imagined possible," I admitted. Near the refreshment table, my father engaged earnestly with the mayor, discussing infrastructure needs for attracting technology businesses to Westridge. His knowledge of the town's commercial landscape had proven invaluable during the center's development. His relationships with local business owners opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed. Across the room, my mother led a group of elementary school teachers through the educational resources area, her enthusiasm infectious as she demonstrated the age-appropriate technology curriculum she'd helped develop. Her return to education had reinvigorated her, restoring the passionate teacher I dimly remembered from early childhood. They've exceeded expectations, Darius observed, joining us with a plate of appetizers. I had my doubts, I'll admit. But they've owned their roles completely. This was true. In the months since the renovation began, my parents had thrown themselves into their positions with a dedication that impressed even my most skeptical Seattle colleagues. My father managed the facility operations with meticulous attention to detail. My mother coordinated educational partnerships with an intuitive understanding of both school systems and student needs. But more significant than their professional contributions was the personal evolution that had unfolded in parallel with the center's development. The carriage house renovation had been completed 2 months after closing, transforming the neglected outbuilding into a comfortable 2-bedroom residence. My parents had moved in immediately, establishing a modest but pleasant home on the property where they had once owned the main house. The arrangement initially struck many as strange, perhaps even pathetic. Why would they choose to live as essentially caretakers on property they had once owned outright? Local gossip speculated that I had manipulated them into this subordinate position as subtle revenge. The reality was far different. Living in the carriage house had been their suggestion, not my requirement. The proximity to the center allowed them to fully engage with its development and operation. The reduced living expenses enabled them to begin rebuilding their financial stability after years of struggle. And perhaps most importantly, it positioned them to redefine their relationship with the property, not as something lost, but as something transformed into a new purpose they could help shape. Speech time, Tariq reminded me, checking his watch. As the center's director, a position he had accepted after careful consideration, he had orchestrated today's event with characteristic thoroughness. I nodded, moving toward the temporary podium set up in what had once been the living room where my family had gathered for holiday celebrations and difficult conversations. The space now served as the center's main presentation area, with rows of chairs facing a large, interactive display wall. The crowd quieted as I took my place, faces turning expectantly toward me. Some familiar from childhood, others new to the community since my departure, all united by interest in what this renovated house represented for Westridge's future. Thank you all for being here today, I began, voice steady despite the emotion tightening my chest. The Nexus Innovation Center Westridge represents more than just a new educational facility. It embodies our belief that technology education should be accessible to all young people, regardless of geographic or economic circumstances. I outlined the center's programs: coding classes for all ages, digital design workshops, robotics, teams, entrepreneur mentorship, college application support. Highlighted the partnerships with local schools, businesses, and the community college. Emphasized the scholarships that would ensure no student was excluded due to financial constraints. This center exists because of many people's efforts, I continued, acknowledgments flowing naturally. Our Seattle team who provided expertise and resources, local officials who facilitated permits and zoning, community members who volunteered time and insights. I paused, gathering myself for the next part. And I would be remiss not to acknowledge 2 people whose contributions have been fundamental to making this center a reality: Nathan and Patricia Thompson. My parents stood near the back of the room, their expressions a complex mixture of pride and humility, as attention shifted to them. Many of you know that this building was once our family home, I continued, deciding in that moment to address directly what everyone already knew. You may also know that I left Westridge under difficult circumstances a decade ago. What you might not know is the journey that brought us full circle to this moment. The room was utterly silent now, the audience captivated by this unexpected, personal disclosure. 10 years ago, when I left for college against my parents' wishes, I carried with me a determination to prove myself in the technology field. That determination fueled the creation of Nexus Innovations and everything that followed. I glanced at my parents, seeing in their expressions permission to continue this honest accounting. When I learned this property was in foreclosure, my initial reaction was complicated. Part of me saw an opportunity for vindication, but what emerged instead was something far more valuable, a chance to transform a painful history into a positive future, not just for me, but for this community, and especially its young people. My father nodded slightly, acknowledging this truth we had come to understand together. This center represents that transformation. It stands as evidence that endings can become beginnings, that loss can lead to creation, that even the most difficult family histories can evolve into new narratives of purpose and collaboration. I gestured toward my parents. Nathan and Patricia Thompson have been instrumental in bringing this center to life. Their knowledge of this community, their dedication to its young people, and their willingness to embrace new beginnings have been invaluable. I am professionally grateful for their contributions and personally grateful for their courage in joining this journey of transformation. The applause that followed was warm and genuine. My mother wiped tears from her cheeks. My father stood straighter, acceptance of this public acknowledgement visible in his posture. After inviting Tariq to outline the center's upcoming programs, I stepped away from the podium, immediately encircled by well-wishers offering congratulations and thanks. Through the crowd, I caught glimpses of my parents receiving similar accolades, community members expressing appreciation for their roles in bringing this resource to Westridge, former business associates acknowledging their resilience, old friends welcoming them back into social circles that had contracted during their financial difficulties. Hours later, as the event wound down and the last guests departed, I found myself alone in what had once been my bedroom, now a state-of-the-art computer lab where local students would soon develop the skills I'd fought so hard to pursue. Full circle! My father's voice came from the doorway, where he stood with my mother, both looking exhausted but content after the day's events. In some ways, I agreed, inviting them in with a gesture. They entered hesitantly, still observing the careful boundaries we had established in our evolving relationship. 6 months of working together had built a functional professional rapport. The personal dimension remained more tentative. Monthly dinners, occasional weekend coffees, conversations that grew gradually more comfortable but rarely touched on the deepest hurts of the past. "Your speech was generous," my mother said, running her hand along the edge of a computer desk. "More generous than we deserved." "It was truthful," I corrected. "You've both exceeded expectations for the center." I would have acknowledged that regardless of our history. Still, my father shook his head slightly. To acknowledge us publicly, after everything, it meant a great deal. I nodded, accepting his gratitude without diminishing it. "Do you remember," my mother asked suddenly, "the science fair project you did in this room? 7th grade? The solar-powered water filtration system?" "That won first place," I recalled, surprised by the memory. "Dad helped me build the frame." "You designed the whole system," my father said, pride evident in his voice. "I just followed your instructions." "You stayed up all night helping me finish it," I said, the memory growing clearer. "When the pump broke the night before judging." "You were so determined," he remembered. "Refused to give up even when it seemed impossible to fix." "Wonder where I got that stubborn streak," I said dryly. He laughed, a genuine laugh, perhaps the first I'd heard from him since my return. "Certainly not from me." The moment of shared memory and unexpected humor created a small opening, a crack in the careful professional facade we typically maintained. "I never thanked you," I said impulsively, "for the robotics team, for driving me to competitions, paying the entry fees. You supported that, even though it wasn't what you ultimately wanted for me." "You were brilliant at it," my mother said simply. "We could see that, even when we couldn't accept where it might lead." "I've been thinking," my father said, shifting slightly, clearly moving to something he'd planned to say. The woodworking equipment in the carriage house garage. I've set it up properly now. I thought perhaps I might offer a makerspace class for students interested in combining traditional craftsmanship with digital design. The suggestion revealed layers of meaning: his desire to contribute something personal to the center, his acknowledgement of how technology and traditional skills could complement each other, his tentative step toward finding his own place in this new reality. That's an excellent idea, I said sincerely. Tariq has been looking for more hands-on programming to balance the digital focus. I wouldn't want to overstep, he added quickly. It's not overstepping, I assured him. It's contributing your specific expertise, just as you've been doing with operations. He nodded, pleased by this validation. And I've been developing a curriculum for parents, my mother offered. Many feel intimidated by technology, unable to support their children's interests because they don't understand it themselves. I thought perhaps weekend workshops for families, students and parents learning together. That addresses a significant need, I agreed. The generational technology gap can be a real barrier. Their ongoing commitment to the center's mission, evidenced by these initiatives they developed independently, moved me deeply. They weren't simply performing assigned roles, they were actively identifying needs and creating solutions, exactly as the most valued Nexus employees did. We should let you get back to your guests, my mother said, misreading my momentary silence as a desire to end the conversation. Actually, I said, making a decision I hadn't planned, I was wondering if you'd join us for dinner tomorrow. Michaela and Darius are here until Sunday. We could use the outdoor kitchen at the carriage house if you're comfortable with that. The invitation, the first I'd extended for a purely social gathering without a business purpose, clearly surprised them. We'd like that very much, my mother said carefully, not wanting to overreact to this small but significant shift. Darius mentioned wanting to try fishing while he's here, I added, remembering my father's longtime hobby. I thought perhaps, you might have suggestions, Dad. The term slipped out unintentionally. Dad, not the formal Nathan I'd used since my return. His eyes widened slightly at the familiar address, but he wisely didn't call attention to it. The river's running high with the spring rain, he said instead, slipping into the comfortable subject. But there's good fishing at Crestwood Lake. This time of year, I could show him if he's interested. I think he'd like that, I said. As they left to complete the post-event cleanup they'd organized, I remained in the computer lab, absorbing the day's significance from multiple perspectives: professional satisfaction in the center's successful launch, personal reflection on how far we'd all traveled in 6 months, cautious hope for what might still develop. Michaela found me there, carrying 2 glasses of champagne from the reception. Hiding from your admirers? She teased, handing me one. Processing, I corrected her, accepting the glass. It's been an intense day. Successful by every measure, she noted. The center is spectacular. The community response is overwhelmingly positive. Even your parents have exceeded everyone's expectations. Including mine, I admitted. I noticed you called him Dad earlier, she said gently. That's new. It slipped out, I explained. I wasn't planning it. Sometimes the unplanned moments are the most revealing, she suggested. How did it feel? I considered the question seriously. Not as strange as I would have expected. Maybe because he's different now. Or I'm seeing different aspects of him than I could at 18. Both can be true, she observed. You've all changed. Not just in circumstances, but in understanding. Through the window I could see my parents in the backyard, directing volunteers in the methodical cleanup process my father had organized with characteristic attention to detail. They worked in easy coordination, their movements suggesting the partnership of decades despite the ruptures that had marked our family history. I'll never forget what happened, I said quietly. That night, The things that were said, the years of silence afterward. No one expects you to forget, Michaela replied. But there's a difference between remembering pain and being defined by it. 6 months ago, I bought this house planning to prove them wrong about me, to show them that the daughter they'd thrown away had succeeded beyond their imagination. And now? I gestured around the vibrant, transformed space. Now I'm more interested in proving something different, that broken things can be rebuilt into something stronger. Different, but stronger. Including families? She asked perceptively. Maybe, I acknowledged. We're not there yet. May never be, in the traditional sense. But we're building something that works on its terms. Professional collaboration, cautious personal reconnection, shared purpose. A new normal, she suggested. Yes, I agreed, the phrase capturing perfectly what we'd established. A new normal. Outside, the sunset painted the sky in vivid oranges and purples, illuminating the newly installed sign at the property's entrance. Nexus Innovation Center Westridge. Beneath it, in smaller letters, empowering every student's potential. The mission statement captured the center's purpose. But for me, for my parents, and perhaps for the community watching our unusual reconciliation unfold, it held a deeper resonance, a testament to the potential for transformation that exists, even after the most painful rejections. The house stood as physical evidence of this possibility. Once a site of conflict and loss, now repurposed into a place of opportunity and growth. The walls that had witnessed harsh words now echoed with encouragement. The doors that had closed, behind me in rejection, now opened wide in welcome to young people with dreams similar to those I'd fought to pursue. And we, the broken family that had fractured within these walls, had found a way to contribute to this transformation together, each bringing unique strengths to the shared mission. 10 years ago, my father had said I would never amount to anything. Today, I had not only proven that prediction wrong through my professional success, but had channeled that success into creating something that transcended personal vindication. The true victory wasn't buying the house that had rejected me. It was transforming that rejection into something that would prevent other young people from experiencing similar pain. It was creating a place where potential was nurtured rather than denied, where dreams were supported rather than dismissed. And perhaps most surprisingly, it was discovering that even the deepest wounds could, with time and effort from all sides, evolve into something different, not erased or forgotten, but integrated into a new story that acknowledged the past while creating space for a different future. As I raised my glass in a private toast to the center's future, I found myself grateful, not just for my own journey from rejection to success, but for the unexpected opportunity to transform that success into something that served a purpose beyond myself. The house was mine now, legally and financially. But its true value lay not in ownership but in transformation, a transformation that extended beyond physical renovation to touch relationships, community, and perhaps most significantly, my own understanding of what it meant to truly amount to something. Not just professional success or financial prosperity, but the capacity to create meaning from difficulty, to build rather than destroy, to find paths to connection where only division had existed before. The new normal we had established wasn't perfect. The past couldn't be undone, and some wounds would always leave scars. But in the center's mission, in my parents' committed involvement, and in my own evolution from seeking vindication to creating opportunity, we had found something I hadn't thought possible when I first saw that foreclosure listing. A way forward that honored both where we had been and where we might yet go. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.